Chapter 181. Important person. But his conflict with Grazd was limited to verbal exchanges only. Paladin continued, the greatest reason the Abyssal Lords do not consider him a rival is because the Wind Demon King has not demonstrated any ambition to expand his territory. Engaging in conflict with him yields no tangible benefits, yet it would expose their backs to far more dangerous opponents. How does this relate to Alephizia not being able to stay in Twin Bridges town? The dwarf crossed his arms with an air of unconcern. Since this Pazuzu fancies the sky, just let him stay up there. Let me remind you first, do not casually utter that name. Repeating it 3 times will allow the Wind Demon King to hear your call, the scholar said to the dwarf with a grave expression. This ancient lord of Oberith seeks something more pure. He delights in corrupting innocence, purity, and righteousness into suffering, cruelty, and wickedness, and these virtues representatives the holy warriors are the Wind Demon King's favorite prey. And I also dislike having a holy warrior loitering around my town, even if she is a succubus, added Tajana, casting a glance at Paladin. What else do you know about Androlina? The 471st layer of the abyss, the domain of Kengyat, the mother of demons, answered Paladin cautiously. It is said to be the only bastion of goodness and hope in the abyss. What? This time it was Bruto who was thoroughly surprised. What do you mean? Is that mother of demons actually a good person? No, it's not like that at all. Paladin's head shook like a wind chime. Kengyat is one of the most ancient Oberith demons, a senior even among the Oberith. She also is the mother of several powerful tannery lords, including Lord Wuan Grazd, Baron Sloth Lupercio, Lord of Shackles Yukariak, and so on, all significant figures in the abyss. Some even more audacious theories suggest that, to a certain extent, the entire race of tannery might be her descendants. Given that, why does her domain have a bastion of goodness and hope? This time it was Alamir who spoke up curiously, clearly very interested in the matter. Do you remember the history of the abyss I told you about? Paladin looked expectantly at everyone like a teacher presenting a question, about how the tannery overthrew the dominion of the Oberith demon race and became the mainstream among demons. You mentioned the chaos that followed, the Demonis Miska the wolf spider, and an invasion that swept across multiple prime material planes, recalled Lancelot. In the end, when the Aera Celestials from the Court of Stars invaded the plains of the abyss, the tannery, who were still slaves at that time, staged an open rebellion. Despite being subjected to indiscriminate aerial bombardments, they attacked their former masters. The Oberith Empire was destroyed, some of the remnants hid deeply within the abyss, and the tannery quickly occupied the entire plains of the abyss after the Aera forces retreated, becoming the undisputed rulers of the abyss. Your memory is indeed excellent, praised Paladin, but when the Aera celestial forces first entered the abyss, the mother of demons successfully deceived Iskadel, the consort of the Star Queen, to sign a blasphemous contract, causing an entire generation of Aera celestial children to be trapped in one of the deepest layers of the abyss. Whoa, Bruto listened with great interest. I wonder what potion Kengyat brewed for that Iskadel, to actually have him willingly sign a contract with such severe consequences. Iskadel's mistake was unintentional, and he has already sacrificed himself in the battle to protect those children. As a consequence of the contract, these remnants of the Aera Celestials will never age, but they are also unable to ever leave the abyss. Paladin spread his hands. The mother of demons originally intended to torment these enemies slowly, but the battle situation changed too quickly. Kengyat found her own and her allies' power rapidly waning, while the Court of Stars opened a portal. Although still unable to bring those children out, the protectors could now enter Androlina directly from the upper plains. What about now? Little Isha was eager to know the follow-up. What happened to those children? Those protectors fought with all their might, even causing the environment of that plane to undergo permanent changes. This time, Tajana was the one responding to the vampire girl's question. It is said that in the lands of the Aera, there were beautiful pastoral scenes, filled with exotic flowers and lush woodlands, basically, the kind of scenery you mortals would like. Sounds lovely, so how do we get to Androlina, and how do we return? Lancelot asked. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but he felt that Tajana's tone when describing the environment of Androlina was a bit odd. There is only one route from here to Androlina, which is through the portal in the Great Abyss. You must first head west, then turn southwest upon seeing the walls of Volcano Fortress. That area is already a war zone, so stay alert. There's nothing worse than finding yourself in the middle of armies of demons and devils. Tajana gestured with her knife and fork, and magic power flowed along her utensils, turning a corner of the tablecloth into a map. You will travel approximately 800 miles through wilderness, and if you are lucky enough to survive, you will encounter the Stygian River again. Only this time, the water of that section of the Stygian River is red, resembling fresh blood. Continue along this blood river and you will find Skeleton Tower Kyoin, a giant tower that stretches from the depths of the great abyss all the way to the surface. What does this Kyoin look like? Lancelot asked seriously, and why do we need to go there? As the name suggests, Kyoin looks like a huge spine. Trust me, you won't miss it, replied Tajana with a malicious grin. At the base of the skeleton tower, 20 miles deep, is a neutral city called Mogrondal. The structure of the Great Abyss is always shifting, and only there can you get the latest map. Otherwise, you may never find the portal to Androlina. I see, Lancelot nodded, and after we complete the mission, we return the same way. Use the amulet I gave you, its magic power can be restored every 30 days. But by then, you'll probably think it's much better there and won't want to come back, Tajana said sarcastically, as if she was certain the human knight would never return. I will definitely come back, Lancelot said, looking into the eyes of the succubus lord, earnestly. There are important people to meet here. Oh? Like who? Tajana asked nonchalantly, yet her eyes were full of anticipation. Like Bruto's old man, Baron. Lancelot didn't finish his sentence before Tajana knocked him to the ground with a headbutt. As if that wasn't enough to vent her frustration, the succubus lord stepped on him a few times. Chapter 182. Ow! This, of course, wasn't any fatal attack, but Lancelot still very cooperatively let out a scream. After beating up the human knight, Tajana seemed to be in a much better mood. She pulled out a heavy bag and tossed it carelessly, pressing the struggling Lancelot, who was trying to get up, back down to the ground. This is your reward, Tajana explained to the others, rest well. In no more than 5 days, you'll need to depart again. Having said that, she waved her hand, and the glow of teleportation magic lit up, causing the figure of the succubus lord to disappear from the dining room of Hagrid Manor. And from Lancelot's angle, he could just make out Tajana's upturned lips. Big brother, are you all right? Bruto poked his head out, looking down at Lancelot, who lay on the ground with a silly grin on his face. What's gotten into him? The dwarf cast a plea for help to his friends. Did he damage his brain? No one answered him. Even little Isa looked at him with the expression one reserves for a fool. Lancelot himself rolled up from the ground in one swift motion, dumping the entire bag of gemstones on the table with a clatter and proudly proclaimed. Come on, brothers, time to split the money. Wow! The dwarf's eyes shone brightly, emeralds, opals, starlight rubies, all the good stuff. Lancelot's attention, however, was first drawn to the mountain crystals mixed in among them, which were equivalent to upper-grade spirit stones. There were easily 50 or 60 pieces, and although not highly valuable, they made up half the quantity, clearly a collection Tajana had specifically gathered for him. Not more, not less, exactly 50,000, Bruto swiftly sorted and appraised the gemstones like a whirlwind, that's without counting those earth crystals. Let's each take 8,000, and give Colin and Carado 1,000 each since you two have spent quite a bit on casting materials and purchasing supplies. Lancelot looked at everyone. I'll use my share for Isa's equipment purchases, if she passes the test tomorrow. As for Ekman's share, I'll hold on to it for now. No objections, right? The voice of the skull came over, and everyone turned around, pleasantly surprised, to see Ekman shakily flying toward them, then crashing onto the pile of gemstones and groaning. Ah, I'm so dizzy. Haha. Ekman, you definitely did that on purpose. Isa laughed and joked, poking fun at the skull, then looked at it with concern at the frightening cracks on its head. Does it hurt? Do you feel any better now? You've got some tough life force, that's for sure. Bruto said in amazement, looking at those wounds. I thought you'd never wake up again. Ah, no worries, this has happened before. Wounds like these will disappear in a few days. The skull struggled to rise back into the air. By the way, my name should be Cromwell. You've recovered some memories. Lancelot curiously asked, is it because you saw that flame demon from the deep pits of hell, right? It might also be because I got whacked on the head. Bruto offered another possibility. Perhaps it's a bit of both, sighed the skull. I understand now why I initially thought my name was Ekmund, for that is the name of my enemy. I've recovered some extremely painful memories, all of them scenes of being tortured and tormented by that demon refiner named Ekmund and his minions. You're safe now, in the living room of Hagrid Manor. lying atop the rewards for this quest, surrounded by friends who care about you, Lancelot gently comforted, is there anything else? Other than your name, have you recalled anything else? Like what you used to do? No, the skull gloomily said, perhaps these terrible memories were the ones I went to great lengths to forget. The flame demon from the deep pits of hell has been defeated by us, it will be trapped in Barto Hell for the next 99 years, unable to trouble you, Lancelot said with a reassuring smile, but maybe one day we will take a trip to the Nine Hells and make that creature pay for what it did to you. Wow, boss, you look so cool when you say that, the skull, now called Cromwell, grinned, so what happened afterward? How did we manage to escape back to Twin Bridges town? What do you mean escape back? Lancelot replied discontentedly, why couldn't we have defeated that creature? If there were 8 of you there at that time, maybe it would have been possible, the skull, full of cracks, quipped, let me guess, you used the amulet given by the disfavored, right? Did I have any other choice? The human knight spread his hands and briefly recounted what had happened afterward. Ah, a duel between a flame demon and a demon refiner, how could I miss such a scene? Lamented the skull, the moment I saw that demon refiner, my mind exploded, and I had no other thought but to beat that creature up. Don't be so impulsive next time, Paladin consoled, otherwise, you could have seen your enemy getting cleaved in two. Afterwards, they talked about other things. As night fell, Kola, Alamir, and the skull, everyone was still a bit unaccustomed to calling it Cromwell, all went to rest, little Issa turned into a small bat and flew to Tajana's castle to continue her training, and Bruto headed off to the blacksmith's district, where, with the story of this adventure, he was going to have more ale than he could drink tonight. Lancelot, however, was seated cross-legged on his bed, checking the condition of his body. Since he had not fully recovered, he was unsure whether he had reached the great perfection of chi refinement realm. But this adventure first yielded the essence of flames, gifted by the Lord of Barrow, Kaldu, and then he absorbed the spiritual energy of a 6-armed serpent demon. Added to the inadvertent improvement during the fierce battle, Lancelot had an intuition that the opportunity for foundation establishment might arrive soon. He had saved up 100 upper-grade spirit stones required for foundation establishment, about 2/3 of which were acquired with Tajana's help, a debt of gratitude that was significantly heavy. Lancelot silently vowed in his heart to repay the succubus lord's kindness 100-fold in the future. But foundation establishment was not something to be rushed. The wisdom of spiritual cultivation left in the small bamboo slip by Han Tianzun made it clear that, cultivators before foundation establishment had insufficient clarity in their perception of heaven and earth and of themselves, making it difficult to judge the success rate of their breakthrough. Thus, it was crucial to prepare thoroughly, to attack this first major barrier in the path of spiritual cultivation in the best possible state. The human knight pushed aside these chaotic thoughts, calming his mind slowly, and began his daily routine of seated meditation and chi cultivation. Chapter 183. Meanwhile, at the battlefield where Elithisia had been rescued today, a portal composed of flames appeared out of nowhere, and a greyish-blue Quasimodo demon crawled out of it. The sight of bodies strewn all over the ground filled this small demon with fear. Many large ones had died, some of whom it recognized, and others it did not. But it had no choice but to carry out its master's order. Circling the site from a distance several times, the Quasimodo demon's eyes suddenly lit up because it had found something sufficient to report back. It was a massive skeleton, with a thick, long tail for its lower body and a humanoid upper body with many arms, the corpse of the 6-armed serpent demon, Ashap. The Quasimodo demon grabbed the skull of the serpent demon and promptly scurried back through the portal, returning to a place filled with flames and smoke. "You're back so soon? What did you find?" The inquirer was a Barlow flame demon, sitting on a throne formed from solidified magma, with a river of lava flowing from an active volcano behind it. "They're all dead." Fear suddenly surged in the heart of the Quasimodo demon, its flame demon master probably would not like the news it brought back. "What?" The flame demon roared, jumping up from its throne, its hand wielding a flame whip, which it used to pull the Quasimodo demon close and gripped it tightly. "I brought back General Ashap's skull." The Quasimodo demon cried out, its body exuding a foul-smelling fluid due to terror. "You can use magic to find out who killed her." "Oh, that's not bad," the flame demon nodded, taking the skull of the serpent demon. The Quasimodo demon's face showed a slightly relieved expression, but the flame demon suddenly flung it directly into the lava behind. "You shouldn't have dirted my hand," the flame demon let out a string of malicious laughter, dipping its hand into the lava as well. Then, using its sensory ability, it sent a summon to a much more important servant. Lord Yiltu, you summoned me. A 10-foot-tall, large demon flew in from a cave above the flame demon. This barely humanoid demon was extremely obese, with a wild boar-like head on its neck. Besides the 2 sharp tusks in its mouth, there were 2 pairs of tusks beside its chin and nose. Moreover, compared to its body, its wings were smaller than its claws, clearly only explicable by magic for its ability to fly. This was a soul judge demon, known more bluntly as a pig demon. By any standard, soul judge demons were the ugliest members within the Tanali demon race, yet they considered themselves quite delicate and elegant, being the only kind of demon that upheld strict dining etiquette. Of course, what often ended up on their dining tables were the limbs and flesh of humanoid beings. However, the main duty of the soul judge demons was not to destroy mortals through eating, or displaying eating. As their name implied, the most crucial ability of the soul judge demon was to immediately identify the most evil soul from a large group of prime demons, coward devils, or even abyss worms such as serial killers or mad tyrants in their past life and elevate them to a fitting form, thus allowing the demon lords to quickly obtain potentially valuable subordinates. Ah, Duosifang Jao, I need your trick. Barlow flame demon threw the skull over. Let's see who killed Purashap then. Although its magic abilities were disparagingly referred to as mere tricks, the demon lord took great offense but cleverly concealed it. With the flame demon's orders clear, Duosifang Jao immediately began preparing to cast the spell. The Quasimodo demon's waist was adorned with a greasy and filthy pouch that held various spell-casting materials. From it, he extracted 2 eyeballs and stuffed them into the eye sockets of the serpent demon's skull. These were originally my afternoon tea snacks, the demon lord explained, should you be curious. How dare you waste my time with such nonsense? The flame demon screamed at him, hurry up and give me the answer I want. The pig-faced demon shrugged, silently despising the other's crudeness, yet his hands did not slow down. With some sinister gestures and his ominous chanting, the serpent demon's skull began to glow. Light shone through the eyeballs in the sockets and cast an image on the adjacent rock wall. The scene was from the serpent demon's perspective, engaged in battle with a human knight. The flame demon watched for a while and muttered dissatisfied. So this is the knight who killed Ashap? He doesn't look so impressive. It seems the serpent demon is injured, the demon lord hinted, doing well to mask his disdain. Is it? The flame demon leaned in closer, what happened to her arm? And why is she fighting alone? Where did that stupid ox run off to? The serpent demon slightly turned its head just in time to see a spinning hammer knocking down an enchantment demon. Damn it! I will chop off this human's fingers one by one and use his own fingers to burst his eyeballs. The flame demon cursed malevolently, all the while lashing the projected image on the rock wall with a flame whip, as if he could strike the human knight directly through it. The rocks, formed by cooled lava, couldn't withstand such abuse and soon crumbled, preventing the 2 demons present from noticing the details of the serpent demon's final moments, only seeing the serpent demon being stabbed in the back, directly piercing its vulnerable heart. Hurry up and tell me where this human, who should be killed 10,000 times and revived by magic 10,001 times, is now. Of course, there was no third person present to answer the flame demon's question. The pig-faced demon immediately cast another spell, and the light within the serpent demon's skull changed, but only projected a murky grey image that showed nothing. Stupid pig! Your trick has failed! The enraged flame demon roared, and even the lava behind him seemed to sense his fury, bubbling up massively. No! My magic has not failed! The demon lord shrieked, his voice like that of a fattened pig awaiting slaughter. This just means he is currently in an area undetectable by prophecy magic, but I have other ways to find him. Then do it quickly! The flame demon lashed out fiercely with his flame whip, striking the demon lord hard. Such an attack was far from enough to kill a high-ranked demon like the demon lord, and the flames did not deal much damage either, but the humiliation was not so easily ignored. The flame demon knew, flame demons do not care. Chapter 184. Carefully concealing his resentful gaze, the soul-judging demon cast another spell, and the glow within the serpent demon's skull began to change. A gigantic white bone tower appeared on the rock wall projection, its base nestled deep within a massive ravine on the ground. What does this mean? The flame demon asked suspiciously, staring at the iconic structure. Isn't that Kai Oin? The spell reveals where the fellow who killed her intends to go next, the soul-judging demon patiently explained. Kai Oin is merely a landmark, their true destination is likely Mogrondal City, at the base of the skeleton tower. It's well known that the power of the great abyss prevents mighty demons like you from entering. I suppose that human has considered this and plans to hide there with Elaphisia to evade your vengeance. That wench is still in the abyss. The flame demon was confused. She didn't immediately flee. She returned to this plane through resurrection. The soul-judging demon thought it would never be surprised again by the flame demon's stupidity. Within 99 years, she'll be trapped in the abyss and unable to leave. Perhaps you could send a minion, a capable assassin, to bring back the soul of that human and the essence of the succubus. So that's possible. The flame demon's face took on a thoughtful expression as he began to summon another name in his mind. Soon, with the sound of heavy footsteps, a human clad in black armor entered the throne hall located at the mouth of a volcano, where the flame demon resided. The enormous helmet completely covered his face, and the black iron armor enveloped every inch of his skin, leaving not even a sliver of a gap. Upon closer inspection, one would notice that all the movable parts meant for disassembly on the armor were welded shut. It was less about providing absolute protection and more like a cage for the wearer. The soul-judging demon watched the newcomer uneasily, someone who made it uncomfortable. This was a dark guardian, or rather, a fallen paladin. If one were to count which mortal profession has killed the most demons, holy warriors would undoubtedly be at the top of the list. Inspired individuals abandon secular identities and positions without a second thought, willingly standing at the forefront of the grand war between good and evil in the multiverse, tirelessly seeking traces of evil to utterly eradicate and never retiring from this calling unless through grievous injury or death. It was faith that steered a holy warrior onto such a devoted path. This power could come from a divine calling or from within themselves. Such conviction was the driving force of a holy warrior, so a wavering belief could lead to mere days of confusion or could steer a holy warrior down a completely opposite path. Such cases were not uncommon. In some ways, those who became holy warriors were already inclined to extremity. The higher they climbed, the harder they fell, so when a great holy warrior's moral scales tipped in another direction, a fearsome dark guardian was born. But don't get me wrong, becoming a dark guardian merely meant the release of a holy warrior's inner moral restraints. It didn't suddenly make demons appear lovable in their eyes. Oh, Enrique, my best assassin, the flame demon leaned forward, his giant body deliberately letting hot breath wash over the other's face. I've found you another splendid prey. Who is he, where is he? Despite not being as strong as the demon before him, the fallen paladin showed no fear whatsoever. The reason was simple, his dark and cold heart no longer felt any pain or despair, and the flame demon couldn't derive any pleasure from tormenting him. It was this very state that made the soul-judging demon next to him rather discontent. Demons are creatures of intense emotional activity, driven by anger, pain, greed, fear, and other desires. The soul-judging demon actually fed on hatred and despair. This dark guardian seemed to be solely interested in slaughter, which it found both terrifying and repulsive. Various thoughts had crossed his mind, yet the demon with the pig face's hands did not cease their movement. It lightly patted the serpent demon's head, and instantly the image of Lancelot appeared on the stone wall. It's this guy who rescued Elaphisia, your former companion. The barbed words of the flame demon echoed in the cave. The fat pig beside him had used magic to determine his next destination, Mogrondal. You should be quite familiar with that place, right? Enrique nodded silently. That's perfect. I want you to find him, torture him, kill him, the flame demon said excitedly, imagining the scenario his words had painted, and that despicable, shameless, foolish succubus paladin, along with any companions they care about, kill them all. The knight in black armor nodded again, then turned to leave the sweltering cave. I haven't given you permission to leave. The flame demon shouted angrily, flicking his whip and pulling the human back. Is there anything else? Despite being bound by the whip, the dark guardian remained unflustered, merely asking in a calm voice. Take this. The flame demon took out a deep purple amulet from a small pouch at his waist and threw it to the dark guardian. The moment he saw the amulet, the eyes of the judge of souls flickered subtly. It was an item crafted by the night witches of the Grey Wastelands, made of soul crystal and abyssal metal, known as the soul-snatching stone. Besides being able to capture the souls of mortals, the greatest function of this item was to absorb the essence of demons, turning the trapped demons into complete slaves of the holder. Bring that wretch Elaphisia back to me with this, the flame demon said with a vicious smile on his face. I want to forever relish in the pleasure of tormenting a holy warrior, so don't let her die by someone else's hands. The dark guardian named Enrique stood still for a moment, and then pocketed the item before saying, May I leave now? Go forth, my hero, ha 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 ha. The flame demon let out a grating laugh, winging back to his lava throne, beginning to fantasize about the numerous pleasures he could derive from having the essence of the succubus in his grasp. The dark guardian left in silence, while the judging demon quietly flew out as well. No sooner had it left the sight of the flame demon than it changed direction, going after the human who had just departed. While it disliked Enrique, the soul-snatching stone was a critical element in the plan, so it had to have a talk with the dark guardian. Chapter 185. The next evening, Twin Bridges Town. The blood-red sun of the plains of the abyss had just sunk below the horizon, but the arrival of night seemed to have no effect on the town. At least, it didn't affect the southeast district where Hagrid Manor was located. Lancelot's neighbours were all reclusive members of the blood race. In most realms of mortals, this race was associated with words like evil, crime, fallen, and concealment, but not in Twin Bridges Town. They never hunted within the town, paid their taxes to Tajena on time, and were keen to invest in business activities, essentially model citizens in terms of law-abiding behavior. But that was just on the surface, because little Issa was one of the victims of the blood race. Fortunately, Earl Barlow of Hagrid Manor, the previous owner, had died, otherwise, this poor girl would have been enslaved forever by her killer as a vampire derivative. The young vampire was now hiding in a room on the third floor of Hagrid Manor, with 2 wooden short swords tucked into her waistband. Her eyes were intently fixed on Lancelot in the courtyard below, who was fiercely sparring with Bruto with a practice wooden greatsword. Observing them were Colin, Alamir, Kola, Bruto's father Berend, and even the Lord of Twin Bridges Town, Tajana himself. The succubus lord was not here to watch a human knight and a dwarf train. The main event of the evening was to test Issa, to see if she was ready to become an adventurer. For the first part of the test, she had to slip one of the short swords into the pocket of any one of the spectators. Otherwise, she would have to stay put in Twin Bridges Town and participate in Lancelot's adventures by listening to stories at the table. Although sitting at the dining table listening to the human knight tell tales of adventure was nice, it only made the girl yearn more to be part of those stories herself. However, she was also aware that Lancelot's suspicions of her were out of concern for her safety, and this concern was reasonable. Just a trip to the market district for bread was enough to reveal the horrors of this plane. Therefore, she who had only played archery games in childhood took her training seriously, despite many instances of fatigue and frustration that brought her to the verge of giving up. Apart from the succubus lord, no one else knew the content of Issa's first test. Everyone thought Lancelot and Bruto's sparring was just a warm-up for the test to come soon, and their match was always entertaining. Bruto was already an excellent warrior. In real combat, a dwarf like him was an unstoppable iron ball festooned with blades, but it was not so in the practice with Lancelot. Every time the dwarf was about to strike a pose for attack, the human would straightforwardly strike at his vulnerability, completely breaking the dwarf's built-up emotion. The expected intense battle did not occur, instead, it resembled more of an adult teasing a child in jest. Bruto wasn't embarrassed by this at all. Killing toad demons was easy, but being dominated by a master was the fastest way to improve. Moreover, Lancelot's increasing harshness with the same mistakes meant that if Bruto's mind couldn't remember a certain technique, his body would learn it through the pain response. And finally, Issa made up her mind, straightened her coat, and gently flipped out of the window. The vampire girl wore ordinary soft leather armor, which offered only limited protection. Its primary function was to allow the wearer to move more quietly and stealthily. With her hands tightly clutching the third floor's windowsill and her feet braced against the wall below, she elegantly swung her body up, and after a few swings, she landed quietly on the ground, prompting Tajana, who had been secretly watching her, to smile in satisfaction. No one knew how vampires came into being. For a considerably long time, vampires had hidden among the noble class of mortal society. But as time passed, some of their descendants inevitably drifted into the lower classes. The appalling reputation of their race subjected them to discrimination, and their ageless appearances often aroused suspicions among those around them, forcing them to frequently leave the places they had lived for some time. Thus, every vampire, even those who refused to consume the blood of intelligent creatures, had to grasp some skills in concealment and stealth to some extent. Their agility, superior to that of normal humans, their innate night vision, and their marginal social status complemented the profession of the wanderer, with many becoming masters in this field. Little Isha was trained by a true master. If not for the succubus lord personally asking for his help, the master would not have condescended to coach Isha, who was not even 100 years old yet. In the master's exact words, not even 100 years old, her human scent hasn't even dissipated. But the satisfaction that came from guiding a young and studious fellow vampire was immense, especially when the girl demonstrated remarkable talent and also maintained her humility. With her seriousness and diligence far surpassing her peers, the vampire girl progressed quickly. Even if one ignored the various abilities her bloodline endowed her with, she was already qualified to be an adventurer. But this was the abyss, merely being qualified was not enough. Now, the girl had to prove that she would at least not be a burden. She moved swiftly under the dim lighting, quickly hiding within the shadow of some withered bushes. Alamir had been trying to make the garden greener since his arrival, but so far, his efforts had been futile. The undead aura released by vampires caused plants to wither and twist, but she couldn't be blamed for this. It was the consequence of having a bunch of who knows how old vampires as neighbors. The mushrooms growing on Isha's own coffin, however, were thriving well. Scanning the few spectators at the edge of the field once more, she carefully chose her next target. Observe, the word the master repeated the most. As a wanderer, it was crucial to learn to choose the right target, using the right methods, at the right time, for the right purposes. Killing was merely one method, and it was a low priority one at that. This was the major difference between wanderers and other professions. Kola was immediately ruled out. Due to his height disadvantage, halflings were a race naturally high in vigilance, and since Kola was also a qualified wanderer, Isha didn't believe she could sneak a wooden sword into the head chef's small pocket. Paladin seemed like a good target. The scholar definitely wasn't as agile as her, and his robe had plenty of pockets suitable for tossing things into. Still, Isha ruled out this option. The reason was simple. Paladin wasn't interested in the fighting occurring in the arena. The scholar couldn't make heads or tails of it, so his attention wasn't focused there. Baron seemed like a viable target, but the little vampire didn't really understand this old gentleman and found it difficult to predict his reactions, so in the end, she fixed her gaze on Alamir. Chapter 186. Elves are naturally endowed with keen senses and have excellent dark vision. Under normal circumstances, this would not be an ideal choice. But at this moment, Alamir's attention was fully captured by the human and the dwarf. He watched their every move with concentration, imagining how he would respond if he were in their shoes. Unlike the solemnly dressed bishops young Isabella had known, who seemed amiable, this elf completely overturned her impression of the clergy, starting with that exquisite yet sturdy full-body armor. Of course, one could not blame her, for a girl who has lived her life in the court had little chance to interact with adventurers, let alone become a priest who adventures. But in reality, Shani's priest was still pretty good. If it were the Church of Heim or Lozanda, who see upholding justice and combating evil as their divine office, people would be unable to distinguish them from ordinary warriors until they performed divine arts. Having chosen her target, young Isabella started cautiously moving closer to the elf. The dim lighting around provided good cover, and with the skills she had learned, she masked her breath, movements, and noise, like just a shadow shifting with the clouds. When she was less than 15 feet from Alamir, she stopped again, waiting for the right moment. Lancelot, who had already sensed her with spirit perception, could not help but silently praise her. Being able to stealth to this distance without alerting others was quite an achievement. The human knight decided to go easy on her. He quickened the movements in his hands, performing several flashy sword techniques, and little Isabella took advantage of the opportunity Lancelot had intentionally created for her. She swiftly and silently moved behind Alamir, her eyes darting around before inserting the wooden short sword into the elf's boot, then silently retreated back. Tajana, who had been watching the entire process, could not help but laugh out loud, attracting everyone's curious glances. "I don't see anything funny about that," Bruto protested discontentedly. "This guy has been trained as a warrior since he was a child, and I spent most of my life by the forge. You have the nerve to say such things." Baron scolded his son while casting an uneasy glance at the succubus lord. "Most of the time, you were on the streets of Rivet Fort, running away from your mother's pursuit. You've spent more time there than by the forge by far." "It's none of your business," Tajana said with a wave of her hand, while pointing towards where the vampires stood. "Little Isabella has arrived. She's the main character tonight, isn't she?" Everyone looked in the direction she was pointing and saw the young vampire girl walking confidently into the area, holding a wooden short sword in her hand. "Good evening, Miss Isabella." Lancelot, leaning on his weapon, gave the young girl a very formal knightly salute. "Are you ready for your second test?" "The second one?" Bruto asked curiously. "What was the first test then?" In the meantime, Alamir noticed something unusual by his feet. He reached into his boot and pulled out a wooden short sword, leaving a puzzled expression on the elf's face. That was the first test, Lancelot explained with a smile. Give it back to little Isabella. I think you might have been watching a little too intently just now. Alamir quickly realized what had happened. The elf let out a resigned smile, tossed the wooden short sword to little Isabella, who caught the hilt of the sword accurately. Her fluid catch impressed everyone. Take it easy on me, Bruto said, rubbing his right shoulder, which Lancelot had repeatedly hit, as he moved to the side with a relieved sigh. Whenever we're adventuring, all sorts of unexpected situations can occur, forcing us to confront enemies alone. Lancelot slowly raised his wooden longsword. When that happens, you can only rely on yourself. Right now, I am a goblin brigand, Bruto suggested. A goblin brigand, Lancelot nodded in agreement, and you must protect yourself. Come on. Little Isabella said confidently, while assuming a ready stance. Lancelot slashed diagonally downwards, controlling his strength and speed to nearly that of a commoner, which was actually quite difficult for him at this time. It was a very basic attack, merely a greeting. Little Isabella didn't attempt to block the attack at all. Instead, she stepped left, slightly crouched down, and easily dodged the sword. But Lancelot wasn't planning to let the little vampire off that easily. His wooden sword quickly followed with a horizontal slash aimed directly at her waist, 3 times faster than before. The girl chose to dodge again, deeply squatting almost to the ground, elegantly straddling with her right foot, and slipping past Lancelot's attack once more. Good. Lancelot couldn't help but praise little Isabella's evasive moves, but his hands didn't stop there. The wooden sword swiftly folded back and struck at twice the speed, targeting the little vampire's chest. This was Lancelot's signature triple combo's last strike. Don't! Paladin, who had been intently watching the duel, suddenly cried out anxiously. Though Lancelot didn't understand what scholar meant, he immediately stopped his motion. At this moment, little Isabella burst forth with astonishing speed. She crouched down again, her short sword parried Lancelot's thrust, while her left short sword stabbed upward. Almost at the same time Lancelot stopped, reaching right under his arm. Are you all right? Lancelot looked at the little girl with concern. She was in an odd state, gasping for breath, and the red glow in her eyes was gradually fading. I don't know. Like someone awakened from a trance, Isabella quickly retracted. My mind was blank just now. I've practiced that move, but I've never done it so fast. A wooden stake through the heart is a fatal attack for vampires, and you just happen to have a wooden sword in your hand. Paladin explained from the side. You scared her. So that was actually an instinctive reaction when facing the threat of death. Lancelot nodded. I've had that experience too, more than once, saved by the body's instinctive response. Let's continue now, see if we can trigger that state again. Little Isabella didn't quite grasp Lancelot's meaning but nodded anyway, once more assuming a fighting stance. Chapter 187. Lancelot raised the wooden longsword above his head and charged again at the young vampire. He was still significantly holding back his strength, but the speed of his weapon swings increased, quickly covering the vampire girl in a myriad of sword shadows. Yet, little Isha was still holding on with astonishing agility, trying to dodge with minimal movements and occasionally using her dagger to deflect Lancelot's attacks. Whenever it seemed she could barely keep up, Lancelot would thrust swiftly like lightning, aiming directly at her heart, prompting the girl to speed up even further. Soon, Lancelot noticed something different. Isha's movements in both her hands were incredibly coordinated, and regardless of the angle from which he attacked, she managed to respond adeptly. He intentionally altered his moves, swinging a diagonal slash from the left followed by an identical attack from the right, all the while maintaining a peculiar rhythm, making Isha's hands almost instinctively mimic the other's movements. Before long, the audience also picked up on the vampire girl's remarkable ability, and Tajana flashed a proud smile. Ambidextrous, Alamir explained to Paladin, this kid has the makings of a warrior. Gradually, Isha's stamina and speed truly reached their limits, and Lancelot gracefully ended the peculiar contest with a gentle retraction of his weapon. The girl was as soaked as if she had just been pulled from water, the red light in her eyes brightly piercing. Although the battle seemed over, she still maintained a defensive stance, ready to react to any attack from any angle. You performed beyond my expectations, Lancelot nodded. Well done, you passed. The words of the human knight seemed to carry a certain magic power. The red light in Isha's eyes abruptly faded, and a smile appeared on her face. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly collapsed. A pair of slender arms steadily caught her, and Tajana, with a flap of her wings, gently carried the exhausted little vampire to one side. Seems like I went a bit too far, Lancelot scratched his head, should I not have continuously stimulated her instincts? No, you did nothing wrong. This kind of mortal threat truly brings out her potential, this one fight is worth half a year of training. Tajana held Isha's hand, channeling a flow of negative energy that was harmful to mortals but healing for vampires into the girl's body, causing her to slowly open her eyes. After ensuring the young girl was all right, the succubus lord pulled out a jewel-encrusted longsword from her dimensional bag, turned to face Lancelot. Why don't you also experience the taste of being on the brink of death? Aren't we about to leave for Androlina? No rush, Ilithysia's new armor still needs a few days. Tajana walked towards Lancelot, her eyes brimming with laughter yet hiding flames of anger. We still have some wooden training weapons here, Lancelot suggested, but still pulled out Frost Slash from his dimensional bag. How could those possibly make you feel the threat of death? The succubus lord's lip curled upwards. Don't worry, I'll also keep my power within a level you can withstand. Extent. As the last two words were spoken, Tajana had already charged. She displayed a speed utterly beyond human, and in the dim lighting, the audience couldn't keep up with her movements, only seeing countless beautiful after-images as if dancing around Lancelot, while the sound of metal clashing was dense like a torrential downpour, letting the audience appreciate the intensity of their duel. Less than a minute later, the fierce battle between the two separated. On closer inspection, everyone saw that although Lancelot was unharmed, his clothes were slashed into many rags, whereas Tajana appeared as if nothing had happened. Your performance also exceeded my expectations, the succubus lord said excitedly. Let's go again. Stop fighting. The anxious voice of little Esha came from the side. Sister Tajana, brother Lancelot, please stop fighting. Yet. Bruto chimed in. How can you fight in front of the kids? With a loud boom, the berserk demon was hammered into the ground by his own father, causing Baron to look apologetically at Tajana. Sorry about that, my son is honest but has low emotional intelligence and never knows the right occasion to speak. Foolish dwarf! The succubus lord shouted angrily. She felt her face heating up and didn't dare turn to see Lancelot's reaction, instead, she waved her hand and teleported away. You guys! Lancelot looked helplessly at everyone, wanting to say something. You've been blessed by Lady Shania, the priest declared to him. Lancelot shrugged his shoulders. The result of the recent duel made him realize the gap between him and the succubus lord, so he temporarily ignored the point the elves had made. Brother Lancelot, I'm ready to take the next test. Little Esha's face still bore a strange flush, but her eyes shone with confidence. There was supposed to be a third test, but I think your performance has already qualified, Lancelot said, smiling as he patted the little girl's head. From now on, we are adventure partners. Yay! Little Esha hugged Lancelot's neck excitedly and gave him a big kiss. This surprising action startled everyone, including little Esha herself. She immediately shrank back shyly, but still said very seriously. I will perform well. Captain. Haha, I have confidence in you, Lancelot said as he ruffled little Esha's hair again. From now on, you'll handle the night watches, okay? The young vampire girl nodded vigorously, then her face showed curiosity. So, what was the original third test? Well. Lancelot glanced at the dwarf, who was struggling to climb out of a hole in the ground. Many fellows don't want their dens disturbed, so they set up various kinds of traps, and disarming these traps requires keen observation and nimble hands. No problem there. Little Esha patted her flat chest. I've been specially trained in that area. I know how to disarm common tripwires, pressure plates, and even magic traps. Right, so the third test was actually having Bruto put on a full set of armor, blindfolded, and then entering a room full of traps, Lancelot explained, spreading his hands. Your job was to ensure he didn't trigger any traps. Of course, those would have been simulated traps, not really injuring the guy. Ooh, that sounds like fun, Bruto said, looking forward to Lancelot. Where is that room? Paladin successfully convinced me to abandon that idea, Lancelot said, smiling at the scholar. He said, don't you know our dwarf friend here? Even the god of thieves couldn't manage that feat. Chapter 188. The companions returned to the house in Hagrid Manor amid joyful laughter, after which Lancelot handed over the mithril cage to Berend. The old dwarf's eyes widened at the sight of the luxurious cage, and when Lancelot told him he hoped to use the mithril to craft a set of full-body armor for himself, the dwarf blacksmith's expression became as excited as if he had found a dragon's treasure. In addition, Lancelot also ordered a set of mithril chainmail and a pair of cold iron short swords for little Isha. He originally considered a mithril breastplate, which would offer the same level of protection but be 1/3 lighter, but due to Isha's vampire constitution, any contact with silver would cause her a burning pain. Thus, he had to settle for the slightly less protective chainmail. Of course, it was Lancelot who was footing the bill for these items, and he didn't mind that at all. Beyond the feeling of satisfaction, ordinary money held little meaning for him, and now that he had amassed enough spirit stones, these could be considered a graduation gift from a brother to his sister. Speaking of spirit stones, Lancelot knew he had to mention his foundation establishment preparations. He was aware that such matters could not be hastened and was thankful for Tajana's assistance. Without her help, gathering such a large number of upper-grade spirit stones would have been a tremendous endeavor. Thus, he had to be utterly confident before making an attempt to break through to the next realm, to ensure success on his first try. After achieving foundation establishment, his strength would undoubtedly greatly improve. Then he could seek Tajana out and spar with her. In the quiet of the night, harboring such thoughts, Lancelot started his daily meditation and chi cultivation exercises. The path of spiritual cultivation is like accumulating sand to form a tower, where perseverance pays off and not a single day should be taken lightly. 7 days later, Tajana flew alone high above Twin Bridges town, watching Lancelot wave at her incessantly from below until he finally disappeared under the distant horizon. She recalled the words of the succubus that left with the human knight, realizing she was increasingly fitting the description mentioned. Perhaps she should have a proper talk with Lancelot, like that succubus Paladin did? No, Tajana, remember the hatred and enemies you bear, the succubus lord said loudly to herself, dispelling the confusion in her eyes. She flapped her beautiful demonic wings and turned away from the place where Lancelot was no longer visible. So what exactly is the situation between you two now? Bruto watched Tajana's figure fade away and turned to ask the human knight. The dwarf was sitting just behind Lancelot, perched on top of the intimidating nightmare warhorse. What do you guys think? Lancelot sighed. He was dressed in his brand new mithril plate armor and wore an overcoat bearing the emblem of Twin Bridges town. What else could it be? You fancy her, interjected the elf riding beside him, astride a date red steed. This was the mount he had summoned through the divine arts bestowed by Shinai, having learned from his experience at the instant fortress. Alamir had prayed for a summoning spell for a mount from his deity as soon as he returned, and Lady Firehair had generously obliged her exemplary priest. According to Paladin, except during significant ceremonies and rituals, it is rare for deities to respond directly to a priest's prayers most of the time. Their divine servants grant the divine arts on their behalf. In other words, Alamir must have caught Lady Firehair's attention for some reason. She seemed to be quite interested in the elf who had been causing a stir in the abyss, probably spying on their adventures as Lancelot had guessed. I think she probably likes you as well, interjected Ilithisia, riding on the other side. Holy warriors have an ability known as the Covenant of the Steed, which allows them to summon a strong and loyal mount to serve in the righteous cause against evil. The steed she rode was an imposing, heavily armored warhorse, eliciting Lancelot's envy. Do you really think so? Lancelot asked the succubus with hope in his eyes. Considering her background, Ilithisia's words bore significant meaning for him. I think so, nodded the beautiful holy warrior. But I feel she has reservations, just like you do. I don't have any reservations. Lancelot tried to sound firm, but his tone betrayed his unease. How could you not? We are succubi, capable of arousing the most primal desires in mortals and experts at toying with emotions. To have no reservations at all would be foolish. Ilithisia shook her head, but what her true feelings towards you are, I believe you are well aware. Lancelot did not reply, riding forward silently, but in his heart, he already knew the answer. 3 days later, the group caught sight of the walls of Volcano Fortress. Built within the mountain, the fortress drew its energy from searing magma. Watchtowers and battlements protruded from the ridges, surveilling any potential invader. This was one of the front-line fortresses in the Blood War, commanded by Visovius, the Flame Demon General, who was loyal to Lord Wuan, Grazd. At the trade fair in Twin Bridges town, Lancelot had met Prince Kylan, who represented the Volcano Fortress, a demon with dark skin and 6 fingers. He'd left a good impression on the human knight and even offered Lancelot an invitation for employment. The group was soon stopped by a demon patrol nearby. Since they were flying the flag of Oasis Fort, the demons didn't attack them outright. After examining a token given by Tajana, along with a cold iron longsword as a gift for the patrol captain, the demons gestured them through. But they were not here to accept the employment invitation today. Instead, they turned southwest and entered the desolate wilderness. Unlike the region around Twin Bridges town, the land here was deep red, as if it had been soaked in blood. Considering the endless battles between demons and devils throughout countless centuries, this description might well be the truth. Alamir's divine arts played a substantial role in their journey. Although their dimensional bags were loaded with supplies, the priest's third circle divine art create food and water could produce enough sustenance to last them 2 days. Although the taste was not ideal, they had cola with them. Lancelot was convinced that even a piece of bark would be exquisite under cola's touch. The halfling chef himself claimed that this was the power of alchemy. The most delighted about this adventure was a vampire dwelling in Lancelot's dimensional bag. She had now become able to tolerate the glow of the sunset. In the evenings, little Isa would eagerly crawl out of the pocket at Lancelot's waist, transform into a tiny bat, and hang on the pauldron of the human knight, gazing curiously at the desolate yet magnificent landscape of the plains of the abyss. Chapter 189. Every night after setting up camp, Lancelot would spend an hour mentoring young Isa, hoping to quickly enhance her combat abilities. It had to be said that the vampire girl's talent was unbelievably exceptional. She grasped many concepts at once, and Lancelot rarely needed to instruct her, most of the time only needing to act as a powerful opponent. However, so far, Isa had not yet experienced real combat. With Lancelot's spirit perception scouting, their nightly camping locations were carefully chosen to be essentially safe from any danger. The few attacks they had encountered occurred during the day when the group, under the command of the human knight, avoided large troops of bloodthirsty armies, but occasionally they were ambushed by low-level demons with intelligence not much higher than wild beasts. In this wilderness far from Tannery's iron fortresses of the lords, there still remained some low-rank Obirith demons. Tannery demons generally had humanoid forms, while low-rank Obirith demons couldn't even be called creatures. Take, for example, the abyss fiends they had killed most on their journey, a kind of demon that from a distance resembled a shrub, but up close was revealed to be a fleshy orb with a mouth that split its body in two, with eyes and claws randomly distributed across its other parts. Their appearance was the very embodiment of madness and chaos. Everyone who saw an Obirith demon for the first time felt a strong assault on their sanity. Fortunately, the team included priests and holy warriors, whose abilities helped everyone resist such shocks and avoid falling into madness simply from the sight of an Obirith. Luckily, aside from their frightening appearances, these monsters were not very powerful. Whether it was Bruto's hammer or Alamir's holy fire technique, they could easily dispose of the creatures, and both were especially eager to eradicate these nauseating monsters. Lancelot had to admit, when they turned into lumps of flesh or were burned to ashes, these Obirith demons were indeed a lot more pleasant to look at. The frequent detours to avoid the armies of bloodthirsty warriors cost them quite some time. It was only after 10 days into the wilderness that the group finally encountered a red tributary of the Stygian River. This was twice the time they had originally anticipated, but it was obviously worth it. This tributary of the Stygian River is known as the Blood River. It branches off to the north at a place called the Plague Horn, while the main river continues westward towards another plain known as the Red Prison Castery. This tributary here flows south, eventually pouring into the Great Abyss. Paladin explained to the group. As a scholar of the Black Cult, his knowledge of the geography of the first layer of the abyss was deeply ingrained, even though this was his first personal visit to these lands. The color of this river water. Could it really be dyed red with blood? Bruto's face looked somewhat disgusted, and this stench is truly repulsive. It's probably dyed red from the riverbed, Paladin shrugged. After all, demons and devils have been fighting on this wasteland for centuries, and their blood has long penetrated every inch of this land. To be precise, it has been centuries. The blood war began before the first mortal was born, and will most likely witness the death of the last mortal, added the skull-headed Cromwell, whose brain contained an encyclopedia of the outer planes, albeit a slightly outdated version. We'd better keep our distance from it, Ilithisia suggested. This area is still a conflict zone, and Bartez's navy could emerge from underwater at any moment. Naturally, no one had any objections to this. According to Tajena, all they needed to do was follow this red river southward to reach the edge of the Great Abyss. Moreover, the group included Ilithisia, who, before converting to a benign alignment and becoming a holy warrior, had spent a long time in the abyss, making her more than suitable to guide the group. 7 days later, the group reached the edge of a vast lake. This was the famous Lake Main, where the Blood River formed a lake before branching into several tributaries towards the edge of the Great Abyss, creating a series of cascading waterfalls. Because this area was close to the Great Abyss, the armies of demons could easily receive reinforcements from other planes, so the Devil's legions had yet to make advances to this place, making it relatively safer. And the Kyoin, skeleton tower they were searching for was situated on the southeastern horizon. The group began to advance towards that landmark building, but shortly after, a plume of dust was raised in front of them as a demon patrol squad rapidly approached. Lancelot had noticed the group of demons earlier, but he did not instruct the team to hide. The surrounding area was under the influence of Mogrondal, a neutral city located at the base of Skeleton Tower, and purposely avoiding its patrol squad might not be a good idea. The demons arrived in front of the group swiftly. They were a pack of 12 large demons resembling humanoid creatures, with developed muscles all over, giant wings and long tails on their backs, and heads like that of a rat. According to the introduction by Paladin before, these were Margot demons, a kind of middle-rank demon that wasn't very intelligent and was one of the more common demons found in the Great Abyss. "Stop!" The leader of the demons shouted at the group, "Who are you, and where are you heading?" Upon hearing this, Lancelot frowned. These guys actually spoke the common tongue? "We're going to Mogrondal City, that's how you say it, right?" Bruto answered nonchalantly, completely unaware of any anomaly. "Ah! Mogrondal, it truly is a great place, with delicious food, soft cushions, and hospitable citizens. Yes, yes, a really great place. You don't even feel like leaving once you're there." These responses were not problematic in themselves, but it was strange to hear them coming from the mouths of these demons. Everyone sensed something was off, as Mogrondal, though a neutral city, seemed to have guards that were overly enthusiastic. With a soft jingle, Frost Slash appeared in Lancelot's hand. The human knight dismounted from his warhorse, positioning himself at the forefront of the team. "Don't come any closer," Lancelot commanded, his long sword pointing towards the group of demons. With his gesture, everyone else also became alert, drawing their weapons and preparing for battle. "Oh dear, you really don't need to guard against us." The rat-faced demons revealed smiles that should not exist on their faces. "Let us tell you where to find the best bars and restaurants in Mogrondal City." "Cut it out!" Lancelot swung his sword again, halting the demons from coming closer. "Who exactly are you guys?" A look of innocence and confusion appeared on the faces of the demons, emotions that should never manifest on such beings. "Have we been exposed?" The leading demon turned to its companions, and the rest of the demons shrugged, a very clear sign. "Then we'll just have to go straight to." The demon turned back, but its declaration of flipping the script was left unfinished. The human knight's long sword pierced out like a lightning bolt, simultaneously silencing the rest of its sentence in its throat. Lancelot was not one of those old-fashioned knights. If a battle was certain, he would not be the one standing still waiting for the opponent to make the first move. Chapter 190. The Margan demon clutched its neck, slumping to the ground. As its life force dissipated, its body gradually took the shape of a humanoid creature with grey-blue skin that was smooth and hairless, and with vaguely defined facial features, much like melting metal. "It's a shapeshifter! A big shapeshifter!" Cries of alarm from the scholar rang out behind, and the battle erupted in an instant. With a roar, Bruto hurled his hammer, flipping another demon to the ground. For Moradin's beard. Not waiting for his weapon to return, the dwarf charged forward with his shield, toppling another demon. His hammer reappeared in his hand, and Bruto swung it furiously, hammering it like it was a mass of iron. With each of his strikes, the demon pinned beneath him gradually reverted back to the shapeshifter form, like a mound of clay. "These guys are so ugly. Never mind the beards," Bruto complained loudly, "they don't even have a single hair on their bodies." Another demon swiped him off a clansman's corpse with its claw, but the attack failed to breach the dwarf's armor, only serving to give his anger a new target. "Die, you big morpher!" Fighting up close with the enemy along with them was Elaphisia. The succubus paladin wore a form-fitting full-body armor and wielded a treasured sword and shield made of cold iron, gifts from Tajana to her succubus kin. Her fighting style was the polar opposite of Bruto's. Lacking Tajana's superior physical capabilities, most succubi, Elaphisia adopted a very conservative tactic. She held up her shield to bear the brunt of the attacks, then thrust her long sword at the moment her opponent's weapon was deflected, precise and orderly like a knight's attendant. The practicality of such a tactic was undeniable. Although she seemed to be on the defensive, with the enemy attacking far more often than she counterattacked, the foe in front of her soon fell, with 7 or 8 clear holes puncturing its body. In the rear, Alamir and Paladin busied themselves casting various defensive magics and divine arts, ensuring their own safety as the team's spellcasters when the battle commenced. Skeletal heads remained by their side, assuming the role of protectors. Kola slipped into the shadows behind the larger figures, with a short bow in hand. As a halfling, she knew charging into the fray and facing 10 at a time wasn't what she should be doing, unless absolutely necessary. She waited patiently for her chance, occasionally loosing arrows that caught the enemy off guard. Lancelot was undoubtedly the most efficient of them all. No demon, or rather shapeshifter, could last more than 3 moves before him. The dancing frost slash was like a streak of light, bringing down one enemy after another, and before the group of shapeshifters realized just how formidable Lancelot was, their numerical advantage had vanished. Once the magic missiles Paladin launched and the holy fire Alamir summoned also began to inflict damage, the morale of the shapeshifters completely crumbled. They tried to turn and flee, but against Lancelot's uncanny speed, this merely hastened their demise. Soon, Frost Slash's blade buried itself in the last shapeshifter's back. As the enemy fell, the intense battle came to a sudden halt, as abruptly as it had begun. But the group did not relax, for another Margan Demon patrol squad had already arrived at the scene, standing not far off, watching their fight. Lancelot withdrew his long sword from the slowly transforming body, flicked the blade to shake off the blood, and stared silently at the newly arrived host of demons. "Well fought," the lead Margan demon spoke, using authentic abyssal. "They were a bunch of escapees being pursued. You've saved us a lot of trouble, but unfortunately, there's no bounty, haha." "What did they do?" Bruto stepped forward to ask. His courage always swelled when Lancelot was present. "They took something they shouldn't have," the leading demon replied, approaching. "Now we're here to interrogate the prisoners." Lancelot silently stepped back, yielding the corpses before him. It seemed this time it was truly the Magrandal patrol squad, and since they showed no intention to engage, he naturally did not want to provoke a confrontation, but he remained vigilant, gripping his weapon tightly. The demon captain glanced at Lancelot and seemed to be interested in this human knight, but immediately turned his attention to the corpse in front of him. He pulled out a magic wand from his waist, emitting a faint purple glow, waved it aimlessly in the air a couple of times, then violently stabbed it into the corpse of the shapeshifter lying on the ground. The light from the wand surged into the corpse, and a bizarre scene unfolded. The shapeshifter's body flipped over and sat up from the ground, its eyes dull as it stared at the demon in front of it. "Was it you who stole the Eye of Surisdan, the divine artifact?" The information contained in the demon's first question took everyone by surprise, and just as Lancelot was astonished at the demon's direct interrogation method, the reanimated shapeshifter actually began to speak. "Yes." The answer prompted the demon captain to become very eager, and he quickly followed up with another question. "Where is it now?" "We lost it." "Lost it?" The demon's face fell in disappointment. "How did you lose it?" "It got heavier and heavier, slipping out of the bag on its own." "Where did you lose it?" "Near the Griffin Rift, close to where we were about to climb out of the ground." "Who instructed you to do all this?" The shapeshifter's face showed a look of confusion, and after a while, it said, "I don't know." As soon as the last words left its mouth, the corpse collapsed once more, its flesh rapidly desiccating, looking as though it had been dead for a long time. "Tch." The demon captain disdainfully kicked the corpse aside. Then it looked up at Lancelot and asked, "Are you mercenaries, planning to go to Magrandal?" Lancelot nodded. It was the second time he had been asked that question today. "Then take this." The demon captain threw something to him. Lancelot caught it and found it to be a strange emblem, seemingly made out of a vertebra. "This token of passage will save you a lot of trouble." The demon spat vehemently, the corrosive saliva burning a small pit in the ground. "You did me a favor, and now I owe you nothing." With that, the demon captain turned around and left with its subordinates and the newly acquired information. "They sure are a bunch of weird ones, hey?" Bruto remarked, then turned to look at Paladin. "Scholar, what's up with that stick that made the corpse speak?" Chapter 191. That was a type of necromancy known as Speak with the Dead. Paladin drew out his cold iron short spear and fiddled with the malformed corpse on the ground. The spell merely animates the residual memory within the body itself, and cannot actually summon the soul of the deceased back, so it can only answer simple, direct questions. After 5 questions have been asked, any remaining energy will be completely exhausted, leaving the corpse in this mummy-like state. They seemed to have mentioned an artifact that was stolen, called the Eye of Surisdan. Alamir reminded, "Do you know what that is?" "I have not heard of that item, but I have heard the name Surisdan." Paladin frowned. "Surisdan, the god of shackles, an ancient god who vanished before mortals appeared in the multiverse. Legend has it that their disappearance has a direct connection to the birth of the abyss, and to this day, they are still imprisoned in the deepest part of the great abyss. Aside from a powerful celestial servant, no one has seen them since." "Let me guess," Lancelot stroked his chin, "that celestial servant wouldn't happen to be the current lord of the Nine Hells, would it?" "Correct, but no prize." Paladin shrugged. "It is said that in the bottom of the great abyss, alongside the god of shackles, also lies the purest seed of evil in the universe. It was from that seed that Asmodeus obtained a power comparable to the deities, as well as his corruption." "I knew nothing of these things." Ilithisia looked at the scholar in surprise. "Tajana says you're a member of the Black Cult? What exactly is this organization?" "In the prime material plane, this cult has always been searching for me. I thought it was some kind of evil cult that worships demons, so I've been hiding from them. The Black Cult has little to do with religion or faith. We are a group of scholars who study the abyss and demons. Half of us hope to use this insight to combat the continuous invasions of demons, and the other half are more interested in understanding the source of that immense power of the demons, which is the abyss itself," Paladin explained. "However, your choice was not wrong. If it had been one of those fanatic researchers who found you, it probably would not have ended well. A living demon is always excellent dissection material." "Well, that's a relief," Ilithisia shrugged. "Glad you're not one of those fanatics." "I think he's rather fanatical," Bruto muttered with a curled lip. "Enough with those stale and over-discussed tales, let's see what kind of loot we can find on these guys." The group was already qualified adventurers, and items from the enemy's bodies were quickly gathered together. There were about several hundred gold coins, some common weapons and armor, as well as other assorted items, but it was a small box made of obsidian that attracted Lancelot's attention because it completely blocked his divine sense. "What's inside this?" The dwarf had also noticed the exquisite box and went ahead to open it. A sudden hum sounded, and Lancelot leaped from the ground, looking around warily, ready for any potential threat. No demons or monsters appeared, as if nothing had happened at all. But, not exactly nothing. Lancelot quickly picked up on the anomaly. The glow that had constantly been emanating from Ilithisia's longsword had extinguished, and the magic shields flickering on Paladin and Alamir seemed to dissipate into nothingness. What happened?" Bruto asked, confused, as he lifted the box in his hand. "I thought there was something good inside, but it's just an ordinary black stone." "This is no ordinary stone," Paladin said as he came over and motioned for Lancelot not to be alarmed. "It's an anti-magic stone that can neutralize magic around it, a product of the time of troubles." "Anti-magic stone?" Lancelot probed the surroundings with his divine sense once more, ensuring there were no threats nearby. "And what is the time of troubles?" "The time of troubles happened about a century ago, triggered by the theft of the Tablets of Fate by the three gods of death, an item that recorded the divine offices of the deities. Don't ask me why they stole that thing, many deities would like to know as well." Paladin fiddled with the small box. The supreme deity, Ao, whose existence had never been known before, was outraged by this act. He exiled all the gods from their divine kingdoms in the outer layers, forbidding any to return without recovering the Tablets of Fate. "What a glorious time!" Alamir's face showed a contented smile. "The goddess came among us faithful followers. I had the honor of dining with her and enjoying beautiful music and splendid dances together." "The followers of other deities didn't feel the same," Paladin said with a twist of his mouth. "During that period, all priests lost their divine arts, and casting spells became a dangerous act without the management of the goddess of magic. By the time everything settled down, many gods had died completely, vanishing forever from the multiverse." "That's quite a story," Lancelot said, genuinely startled by the tale. "The gods walked the earth in person." "Yes, and since their connection to the divine kingdoms was severed, the powers of these deities were greatly reduced. In those years, even mortals managed to achieve the feat of slaying a god, something unprecedented in the past." Paladin handed the small box to Lancelot. "Stones like this are products of the time of troubles, said to be byproducts of divine beings falling into the mortal realm, quite rare." "I have heard of such things as well," Ilithisia added as she came closer. "Many powerful demon lords are willing to pay a hefty price for them, especially when a daring spellcaster gets hold of a demon lord's true name, because these stones can free them from the binding of summoning formations. Indeed, while this item is not as rare as a divine artifact, in the hands of the demon lords weighing thousands of pounds, its effects are almost equal to that of a divine artifact, the scholar said, frowning. The masters behind these shapeshifters have really gone all out. There must be scores of defensive formations around the Eye of Sarazdan, but this anti-magic stone renders all the anti-theft measures useless. Lancelot looked curiously at the stone in the box, touched it, and found it to be much colder than it looked, almost like a chunk of ice. He dropped one hand and silently activated the King Yin sword art, generating a sword aura from his palm made of innate true chi, and quietly poked a hole in the ground. The efficacy of magic originated from the manipulation of the magic net, and the strength of divine arts came directly from the deities, fundamentally both being external forces. His own true chi, as well as the physical strength that came from his spiritual cultivation, stemmed from himself and were not restricted by the anti-magic stone. How large is the effective range of this stone? He looked up and asked Paladin. Why not try and find out, the scholar shrugged. Alamir, take your hardhead hammer and walk off into the distance. Chapter 192. The elf priest immediately understood the scholar's meaning. He drew his hammer of dissolution, a trophy acquired from the succubus palace at Oasis Fort. In the past, whenever he held this weapon, it would emit a bright and warm light, but now there was nothing, as if it were just an ordinary weapon. However, after he had walked about 30 yards, the hammer in his hand suddenly lit up again. The elf took a few steps back, and the light on the hardhead hammer went out accordingly. That's about the right distance, Alamir returned to the others, the range isn't that large, so if you plan to surprise the enemy with this, you'd better charge into the crowd first. Don't worry, Lancelot tucked the box into his chest, if used well, this thing really can turn the tide. As he closed the box, the weapon in the elf's hand lit up once more. The group then got their equipment together and began to advance towards the distant skeleton tower. On the way, they encountered several of the demons' patrol teams, but when Lancelot showed them the spine emblem, the patrol teams waved them through, though their attitude was still very unpleasant. As the sun was about to sink into the horizon, they finally arrived in front of the giant skeleton tower. Feeling the movement in his dimensional bag, Lancelot let out a little vampire that had just woken up. Good afternoon, everyone. Little Isha's cheerful voice appeared before she did. Turn around and look behind you, Lancelot said with a smile, patting the vampire girl's head, such a view is not something you can see just anywhere. Little Isha did as told, and she was immediately deeply shocked by the magnificent scene before her. The plains of the abyss before her had split open. The ground abruptly vanished ahead, replaced by a vast rift. One could not discern the boundaries of this rift with the naked eye, as it stretched from one end of the horizon to the other. The waters of the Blood River poured down from the cliff's edge, forming massive waterfalls and filling the rift with red mist, obscuring any view of its bottom. If it even had a bottom, that is. Welcome to the Great Abyss, also known as the Blood Rift, the true entrance to the bottomless abyss, Cromwell spoke up somberly, there aren't many places in the whole multiverse crummier than this. Now, please look to your right-hand side, that is Kaoin, the famed skeleton tower. Little Isha turned her head and the sight of the structure made her scalp tingle and stomach churn instantly. If the multiverse were to conduct a contest for evil architecture, the skeleton tower would certainly be in the top 10. This soaring spire was not a tower at all but the vertebral column of some colossal being, clinging like a centipede to the sheer cliffs of the Great Abyss. Its segmented structure was enough to awaken primal fears in any humanoid creature. The part of the tower that rose above the ground had a radius of 1,000 feet, and that was the thinnest part of the spine. According to Alethisia's introduction, each segment of the spine was actually a vast hall. Some halls were torture chambers, prisons, birthing rooms for demons, as well as magic laboratories, meditation rooms, and even libraries and map rooms, containing secrets unknown to anyone. Winding stairs connected these halls, but climbing them one by one was an absolutely horrifying torture. If someone truly did that and wasn't killed by the guards or traps within the tower, then after descending 20 miles, they would emerge from the bottom of the tower and arrive at Mogrondal City, the next destination of their journey. But not just anyone could enter the interior of Skeleton Tower. Lancelot narrowed his eyes and looked up at the top of the tower, his spirit perception alerting him to an exceptionally powerful presence, like a dark cloud looming over the peak of Skeleton Tower. Some strange thoughts surfaced in the depths of his consciousness, whispering desires for pleasure and torture, but the small bamboo slip in his divine sense emitted a hazy green light, keeping those whispers lingering outside his sea of consciousness. Do you feel like there are darker thoughts in your mind? Ilithisia stepped over. They are not your own thoughts, but those of the Lord of Caoin. He sits atop Skeleton Tower on a throne known as the Throne of Malice, wielding the power of the tower. Anyone can ascend to challenge his position, and if you defeat him, you become the master of Skeleton Tower. But unless the challenger is defeated, you will never be able to leave that throne, only sitting there, overlooking the kingdom that is nominally yours. Lancelot shrugged. Naturally, he had no interest in challenging the so-called Lord of Caoin. That fellow sounded more like a prisoner of the tower than its master. Lancelot certainly didn't plan to walk down those steps. Not to mention the life-threatening dangers, or boredom, along the way. They first and foremost didn't have the qualifications to enter Skeleton Tower. The emblem given by the captain of the demon patrol wasn't enough, only the nobility of Mogrondal City had the privilege to freely enter and exit the tower. The other route to Mogrondal was even more despairing: 20 miles of vertical free climbing. It might not be too difficult for creatures with wings or those who could fly with the aid of magic, provided they could deal with the residents perched on the cliffs of the Great Abyss, mainly wild-cast demons and flomos. This wasn't an unimaginable route. In fact, within the 20 miles between Mogrondal and the surface, there were numerous portals distributed, leading to the various levels of the abyss. Although these portals weren't the sole entry points to their corresponding levels, they were mostly guarded tightly. The demons serving as gatekeepers for the Abyssal Lords usually didn't welcome visitors. Unless given clear instructions, their everyday job was to attack any creature within their line of sight, although most were the unlucky ones who happened to fall in front of them. The Great Abyss had another feature: demons at the Lord level couldn't enter it, at least not in their normal state. Some scholars believed the reason was the red mist pervasive throughout the Great Abyss. After all, it was the vaporized water of the Stygian River, while others insisted it was due to some energy related to the core of demons themselves. Furthermore, teleportation magic didn't work there, except for the naturally formed ones. The efficacy of prophecy magic was also severely suppressed within the Great Abyss, making it difficult to track any creature using it. With no Lord-level demons, some of the stronger mortal adventurers could be a bit more arrogant in the Great Abyss. But only a bit. Due to the absence of a powerful entity capable of suppressing all rebellion, the demon's nature made it hard for them to control themselves and not attack others. The chaos within the Great Abyss far exceeded other levels, with battles occurring almost every moment. Even though the demon armies were fighting off devil's invaders overhead, these chaotic and evil creatures still reveled in an endless cycle of fratricide within the Great Abyss. Of course, if the demons could unite, the multiverse would have been theirs long ago. Chapter 193. In such circumstances, Mogrondal was simply a beacon within the Great Abyss, being the only place that could offer security to outsiders. In fact, despite the ubiquitous wars, the Great Abyss remained the transport hub of the entire bottomless abyss, and Mogrondal naturally became one of the busiest commercial cities in the abyss. However, a city that required a 20-mile climb to reach had no commercial value, no matter how alluring the clinking of gold coins in its great bazaar might be. It couldn't attract merchants, mercenaries, and thieves from the entire multiverse to complete countless deals that could change the tide of the bloody conflict as it did now. In reality, the most convenient way to Mogrondal was by boat, and Lancelot and his group were now standing next to a dock on the shore of the Blood Lake, looking at several dilapidated small boats moored to the bank. "Is this all there is?" Bruto lamented. "They look like they should have sunk a long time ago." "Haha, that's the reaction every brat has the first time they see a Stygian river boat," the skull-headed Cromwell scoffed. "Take a look at who the boatmen are. As long as they are in control of the boats, they will always float on the water." Upon hearing this, Lancelot concentrated and examined the figures standing at the stern of the boats, finding their bodies hidden under cloaks to be extremely withered, somewhere between skeletons and zombies. The heads under their hoods were nearly identical to Cromwell's skull. The only difference was that their eyes shone with a faint red glow, whereas Lancelot's skeletal companion's eye sockets contained eyes no different from those of a living person. "Is that a ferryman demon?" Paladin asked with curiosity. "I've heard of such creatures. Legend has it they possess supernatural abilities to control boats and are familiar with every inch of the Stygian River. As long as you pay enough for the fare, they can take you anywhere." "Not anywhere. They won't go to places that threaten their own safety," the succubus Paladin interjected. "They are a part of the Yugoroth demon tribe and maintain absolute neutrality in the blood war. Be it Tannery or Barthez, as long as you are willing to pay, their services are yours. These ferryman demons are employed by Mogrondal's administrator to shuttle any travelers needing to go to the city." "I see," Bruto shrugged. then let's hurry onto the boat. How long have we been out in the wild? I can't believe I'm saying this, but I hope to sleep in a bed tonight, under a solid ceiling, not a tent flapping noisily in the wind. No one naturally opposed the idea, and they chose a boat that could just fit them. Lancelot stepped forward to negotiate with the ferryman demon at the stern. Destination. As the human knight approached, the ferryman demon asked in a dry and hoarse voice, eyes brimming with anticipation. Mogrondal. Upon hearing that name, the anticipation in the ferryman demon's eyes vanished. It scanned the people behind Lancelot and said dryly. 8 people, 100 gold coins each. Can we pay with gemstones? Lancelot didn't intend to haggle over whether a small Isabella in his pocket counted, or argue about whether a skull could be considered cargo. He didn't want to risk angering the ferryman demon over saving a bit of fare, and they weren't short on money now. Okay, Lancelot handed an emerald to the ferryman demon. The extra is an offering to Karen, in gratitude for the service provided by its servant. The actions of the human knight seemed to have made the ferryman demon a bit more amiable. Karen is the protector of all ferryman demons, and following Cromwell's hint, any act of respect shown to Karen would make the journey on the ferryman demon's boat a bit more comfortable. Another widely known fact in the outer layer is that if one is willing to pay 4 times the fare, the ferryman demon would provide utterly loyal service, even if it had been bribed to lead you into a trap. But this time, the group didn't need to do so since the lords of Mogrondal City had already reached an agreement with these boatmen, ensuring that all boats from Blood Lake to Mogrondal would arrive safely at their destination. One by one, everyone boarded the boat, filling the small vessel just right without making it too crowded. Add latest chapters at fortuitous only. Fasten your safety belts, the ferryman demon boatman advised, which was when everyone noticed many flat straps scattered next to the seats. You mean these straps? Bruto asked, lifting one of them. How are we supposed to use them? Use them to bind yourself to your seat, the ferryman demon said, revealing a wicked smile. Tighten them well. Think about those waterfalls, Cromwell chimed in from the side. Ferryman demon's boats won't sink, but they also won't fly. Bruto's face fell instantly, and the dwarf bound himself as quickly as possible, looking like a turtle that a vendor had taken to market. Everyone sprang into action, including Lancelot, who didn't show off but obediently used 2 straps to secure himself to the seat. After the ferryman demon patiently ensured that everyone had taken safety measures, he gently pushed off with his oar, and the small boat left the shore, heading toward a waterfall at the edge of the great abyss. Suddenly, I think rock climbing isn't so bad, Bruto said with a pale face as he eyed the approaching cliff, at least woah. He couldn't finish his sentence before the ferryman demon mischievously pushed hard with his oar, causing the boat's speed to surge wildly as it shot out over the cliff like an arrow released from a bow. A second later, everyone found the boat was now completely vertical to the ground, sticking to the waterfall as it accelerated towards the endless abyss under the force of gravity. Cola and Isabella screamed, but Bruto's voice was the loudest. The dwarf's screams even seemed to disperse the surrounding mist, clearly having accumulated too much energy from the days of ample food and steady journey. Soon, the terror in their screams disappeared, and everyone even began to enjoy this thrilling and exciting stretch of the journey. The boat landed in a large pit at the bottom of the waterfall, immediately leaping down another. Sunlight naturally could not reach such depths, but glow-in-the-dark mushrooms dotted the cliffs and crags, providing illumination for the passengers to appreciate the scenery whizzing by. Lancelot saw large flocks of winged demons, mainly flomos, a kind of demon known for their low intelligence and extreme ferocity, with large feathered wings and beast-like bodies, a cross between humanoid creatures and vultures. Another frequently encountered demon was the Cass, which looked like a nauseating mix of flies and humans. The overseer he had met when encountering Bruto was a Cass demon. These demons showed no interest in the speeding boat, and though 20 miles was not a small distance, in less than half an hour traveling at a speed close to freefall, the outline of Mogrondal City appeared beneath everyone. Chapter 194. From above, Mogrondal is a hollow city, at the center of which lies an unfathomably deep hole. The base of the skeleton tower, Kyoin, is anchored to the cliff edge of the Great Hole, and the city districts are constructed on the flat ground surrounding it. The city also extends vertically, with the higher buildings looking more refined, while the bottom is entirely in slum condition. Before everyone had the chance to take a closer look at the abyssal city, the boat had smoothly landed on a lake in the southeastern part of the city, slowly steering towards an adjacent dock. Welcome to Bloodgaze, the ferryman demon boatman spoke. I hope you've enjoyed this journey. Ah! Little Isha sitting beside Lancelot suddenly let out a shriek, her eyes wide with fright. Everyone also saw what frightened the little vampire. Above their heads, countless heavy chains were strung with thousands of flayed bodies, some of which were still struggling in agony, clearly not quite dead from the skinning alone. Those are the criminals who violated Mogrondel's laws, Ilithisia explained with a look of disgust. The Lords of Withering believe these sights can bolster outsiders' confidence in Mogrondel's law and order. I'm more concerned with how not to end up as one of those skinned folks, Bruto, who wasn't too shocked, said. Having been through several adventures, he was somewhat numb to such scenes. Where can one find a codex that stipulates what is allowed and what is not? The succubus paladin looked at the dwarf with an incredulous gaze, then chuckled and shook her head, uttering a simple 5 words. Don't cause any trouble. Ilithisia's words plunged everyone into silence. In this somewhat oppressive atmosphere, they one by one disembarked and set foot on the long-renowned neutral city. Last time I came here, I was in chains, shackled as a prisoner, Ilithisia sighed. I didn't expect to return to this place so soon. Look at that, Bruto pointed to the center of Blood Lake, where a waterfall of blood from above propelled a giant water wheel, providing energy and power to the city. Didn't think there'd be such a thing. The city creator's engineering isn't half bad. What do we do next? Our main purpose here is to procure the latest map, Lancelot explained. Without it, we'll never find the portal to Androlina. Why the latest one? Bruto asked curiously, following Lancelot down a long dock towards the shore. Isn't an old one okay? The structure within the Great Abyss is not static, Paladin explained to him. Above this city, near Mogrondel, the portals are relatively fixed, while those below this city move to other places nearly every month. All right, Bruto shrugged, and as they spoke the group had already passed through the docks and reached the bustling streets. Are we going straight to find the map, or should we find an inn to relax a bit first? Lancelot narrowed his eyes, surveying the city. The architecture here was primarily made of stone cottages and natural caves, so densely packed they brought to mind an insect's nest. The pedestrians on the street were naturally of various demons, but one also frequently saw groups of orcs, goblins, zoel, as well as other mortal races. However, what concerned him most were the city guards that could be seen everywhere, a kind of demon whose body was covered in chitinous shells, resembling humanoid beetles. Those are Maziros demons, a neutral type among the Ugro demon tribe. Apparently noticing Lancelot's curiosity, the succubus explained to him, the Lords of Withering have hired these mercenaries to maintain order in the city. I've heard the term Lord of Withering mentioned a few times. Alamir also leaned in. What are they? The rulers of this city. As far as I know, that's correct, Ilithisia nodded. There are 4 Lords of Withering in total, each ruling over a quarter of the city. The one we're in now is called Spray Plain, and the other 3 are Beggar's Cliff, Blood Abyss Lookout, and Hive Valley. Additionally, there are some honorary Lords of Withering, who make up the noble class of this city. How does one become a Lord of Withering? Bruto asked excitedly. Is it by direct challenge? That's right, the succubus paladin replied with a resigned smile. If not specified otherwise, any title in the abyss can be taken in this manner. What do you think, big brother? The dwarf nudged Lancelot with his elbow. Why not consider becoming a Lord of Withering? I think you have what it takes. And then rule over a bunch of citizens who are trying to murder you at every turn. Lancelot shook his head in disdain. With so many merchants coming and going here, there must be some decent restaurants, right? The halfling Kola looked expectantly at Ilithisia. I want to eat some real food, the kind that doesn't require prayers. Alamir gave a hurt look but didn't object, because he too was sick of living off the divine arts created provisions. I suggest going to an inn named Tears of Lazaka, Ilithisia proposed. Its food and rooms may not be as good as others, but it attracts foreign travelers with extra security measures. Its owner also has a very special identity that can save the guests a lot of trouble. Is the owner named Lazaka? What's wrong with his tears? Little Isabella couldn't help asking curiously, the vampire girl having recovered from the earlier shock. No, the owner of Tears of Lazaka is the immortal Pecos, who has twice claimed the title of Lord of Withering but soon gave it up because he found it boring. Isabella's question made the succubus paladin's expression a bit strange. He has been killed several times in public, but he would always reappear the next day as if nothing had happened, except that his enemies would have mysteriously disappeared. Because he seemed to never be able to die, he was awarded the title the Immortal. Sounds like a very hospitable host, Lancelot nodded. Where is this inn located? If I remember correctly, it's 2 blocks in that direction. Shortly after, the group stood at the entrance of a 3-story stone inn, the sign featuring a string of strange symbols, but Lancelot immediately understood they meant tears of Lazaka. At the end of the sign were some dazzlingly colored tubes, forming the image of a weeping angel hanging in the air. Chapter 195. Ilithisia showed an obvious look of disgust at the sign, but she said nothing. Lancelot raised an eyebrow and pushed open the large door of the inn. "Welcome to Tears of Lazaka." As soon as they entered, a pleasant voice rang out beside them. Lancelot turned his head and saw a halfling bartender behind the counter waving at them. However, Lancelot's spirit perception warned him that this fellow who looked like one of Kola's kin was definitely not a halfling, and his strength was undoubtedly strong. There were also several Miizeros demons in the bar, their eyes like ripe oranges without pupils, surveying the surroundings. Lancelot guessed that they were guards hired by the inn's owner. There were some other things that caught his attention too. A few individuals sitting in the shadows had their gazes fixed on him for several seconds. Although the stairs were incredibly covered, Lancelot's sharp spirit perception still noticed them. As he turned his gaze towards them, those individuals immediately averted their looks, feigning nonchalance. Considering the reputation of the inn's owner and the guards all around, Lancelot did not take any further action but quietly heightened his vigilance. "Wow! Hi there!" Kola was very pleased to see one of his kind. "I'm Kola, what's your name? What are you doing here?" "People call me the immortal Pecos, I am the owner of this inn," the halfling bartender said with a smile, startling everyone. "Whatever you need, just let me know. Our services will surely satisfy you, and the prices are reasonable." Sorry, I didn't know you were." Kola's smile awkwardly froze on his face as he involuntarily stepped back. Don't be nervous. I turned into this so as not to scare the guests." Pecos spread his hands. "To be honest, my original appearance is really too disgusting." "Respected immortal Mr. Pecos," Lancelot stepped forward, "please forgive my companion's rudeness. We need to stay here for a few days. Do you have any rooms available?" Yes. The halfling figure, formerly the Lord of Withering, excitedly rubbed his hands. "Would you like separate rooms, or a large suite?" "I strongly recommend the large suite, which has 3 beds, the largest measuring 15 feet wide." As Pecos spoke, he revealed a sleazy smile, stealthily glancing at the succubus standing not far behind the group. "Sounds good." Lancelot didn't attempt to clarify anything. "What's the price for the large suite? And how much for individual rooms?" "The large suite is 1,500 gold coins per night. You won't find a more lavishly decorated place in this city. But if you want a more private space, our comfortable rooms will perfectly meet your needs, and the price is very fair, just 200 gold coins each per night. What do you all think?" Lancelot turned to ask the group, "Do we take the large suite or individual rooms?" "I'm fine with either." Alamir, who had the highest standards of hygiene, was the first to speak, and the rest indicated that whatever Lancelot decided would be fine. The human knight weighed his options internally. Although there were 8 of them, he and the elves only needed to meditate. The skeleton head only occupied a pillow, little Ish's bed was in his dimensional bag, and the succubus needed no sleep, so in reality only Bruto, Kola and Paladin truly required beds. However, recalling the few malicious glances from earlier, he decided not to skimp on spending. Despite there being quite a few guards in this inn, Lancelot had no plans to entrust their safety entirely to this halfling innkeeper. "We'll take a large suite, and stay for 1 night, Lancelot said as he pulled from his chest 2 pieces of yellow jade and 1 olivine, placing them on the table. "Will this be enough?" "Enough. More than enough." Pecos merely glanced at the gems before hurriedly snatching them up as if afraid Lancelot might change his mind. He quickly pulled out a key almost as large as his own arm from a drawer and handed it to Lancelot. "Go up the stairs over there, the room on the left-hand side of the 3rd floor is yours," Pecos said, his face donning a highly insincere and discomforting smile. "Have you all dined yet? Our abyss roasted chicken is exceptionally delicious, and with a couple of glasses of our signature wine, the Tears of Lazaka, what a wonderful night it would be." "Tears of Lazaka? Isn't that the name of your pub?" Bruto asked curiously. Being a dwarf, he was interested in any type of alcoholic drink. Lazaka was a celestial servant once captured by the Lords of Withering. The wine distilled from his tears could make even the strongest tannery staggeringly drunk. The halfling bartender remarked nostalgically. Sadly, that angel was later rescued by a group of daring adventurers. Although he did shed plenty of tears before that, such exquisite wine is diminishing by the bit. Lancelot immediately understood the source of the succubus Paladin's aversion, as if he recalled correctly, Ilithysia's lover was also a celestial servant, known to mortals as an angel. "We will come down to dine later," Lancelot replied calmly. "Do you have any more ordinary beverages? We wouldn't want to be hunted by some celestial creature suddenly emerging because we drank that kind of wine." "Your friend with the bat wings would really like it," Pecos, still unwilling to give up, said. "Don't you want to please her?" "We won't pay for that kind of thing," Lancelot firmly refused again. "See you later then, Mr. Pecos." He turned away from the bar and led his group upstairs. "Thank you," he whispered to Ilithysia as they passed by her. The succubus said nothing, just silently followed him up the stairs. The group reached the large suite on the third floor, and while it was far from the lavish luxury the innkeeper had boasted, the essential facilities were indeed all present. It featured a vast living room, a master bedroom, 2 secondary bedrooms, and 2 bathrooms. Baths were the most missed luxury by the group who had spent 3 weeks in the wilderness. Even Bruto was loudly proclaiming that he too needed to freshen up. The companions took turns cleaning themselves, with only Alamir and little Isha taking a bit longer. For the former, bathing was part of his religious rituals, and for the latter, it involved using a bathtub. Running water was like strong acid to vampires, and after a few memorably careless mistakes, the vampire girl had learned not to repeat that error. Chapter 196. The bathing water was somehow disconcerting, though. It was a pure black, sourced directly from a black pond in the blood abyss, but not at all filthy. It was the only water in the entire Mogrondal city that contained no toxins, diseases, or curses and could be directly consumed by mortals, and even Alamir's divine arts found nothing amiss with it. However, out of caution, the group had a priest conjure up a large barrel of real, clean water to rinse themselves with after their baths, which at least gave them some psychological comfort. Bruto was the last to enter the bathhouse, and after the dwarf finished, the scene in the bathroom looked as though someone had tossed an alchemical bomb into a cesspit. Even Paladin had to use a spell to clear the drains, which were completely clogged with the dwarf's shed hair. The cool bath water not only washed away the dirt and grime from their bodies, but it also took away the weariness of the journey, reviving their spirits. An hour later, everyone was ready to head downstairs to indulge in a lavish meal as a reward for themselves. Of course, they still donned their full armor, weapons at their waist, and shields on their backs, looking as if they were prepared to dine and dash. But of course, they would never do such a thing. Moral preferences aside, the skinless corpses hanging over Blood Lake quite effectively demonstrated the consequences of that action. And to be honest, in the abyss, spending money is actually harder than earning it. Bruto had already tossed all the gemstones into Lancelot's dimensional bag, simply because the dwarf found them too heavy. After parting with a yellow jade worth 500 gold coins, they enjoyed the most sumptuous meal they had since arriving in the abyss. Although they still preferred Kola's cooking, the halfling would never find such rich ingredients in Twin Bridges town. In fact, Kola himself was the happiest eater of them all. This race of unfussy gourmets has never been picky about food. They express their appreciation for all food in the simplest of ways, by eating it. Due to Lancelot's generous spending, Pecos was very enthusiastic, but Lancelot naturally did not let his guard down because of the host's honest and lovable appearance, always maintaining a very respectful attitude. It wasn't difficult to do so because his spirit perception constantly reminded him that Pecos felt more dangerous than the Red Dragon back in Twin Bridges town that traded gemstones. While the halfling innkeeper was bustling about, peddling various goods and services, on his third approach to the table, Lancelot casually brought up the question he was truly interested in. "Mr. Pecos, do you know where I could buy the latest maps? We're looking for a route to a lower plane. I would be more than happy to sell you one. In fact, it's one of my main businesses," Pecos said with a curious expression on his face, "but I can only regretfully tell you that I cannot provide you with a map, at least not right now." "Why?" Bruto asked curiously. "You didn't even ask us which layer we were headed to." "That's a matter of our guests' privacy, and there are not many lower planes worth visiting," the halfling proprietor said, winking at the succubus, "but the issue isn't where you want to go. The problem is that an extremely important item has recently gone missing in the city, and even the lofty lords of Withering are unable to locate the positions of the various portals within the Blood Abyss anymore." "Is it the Eye of Sarazdan?" Lancelot asked calmly, while keeping a watchful eye on the other's reaction. "That's right." Surprisingly, the former Lord of Withering, who seemed quite adorable, readily admitted it, yet he smiled at Lancelot. "I heard there was a group of passing mercenaries who helped the city patrol team take out those shapeshifter thieves." What exactly is the Eye of Sarazdan? Paladin couldn't help asking curiously, I mean, what does it have to do with the locations of those portals in the Great Abyss? On the outside, that divine artifact is nothing more than a black sphere, nothing remarkable. It's useless to you all, only a few of the old fellows living in the skeleton tower can use it. Pecos shrugged, what I know of its use is that it can view every corner of the Great Abyss and consequently draw a map that's very important to this city. Unfortunately, shortly after the artifact was stolen, an earthquake occurred here, which means the portal's locations got scrambled again. Why is the map so important? Little Isha asked curiously, can't you just take a ship here? Because this place is merely a hub, my beautiful vampire miss, merchants who come here usually have destinations elsewhere. The halfling innkeeper spread his hands, if those lords of Withering don't find a way to get back the Eye of Sarazdan quickly, this city will soon lose its reason for existence. With your identity, you must have already received the latest intelligence. Paladin looked at the adorable former Lord of Withering with hope. Those shapeshifters didn't manage to take the artifact away, the Eye of Sarazdan is still in the Great Abyss. I did hear about this news, but certainly not earlier than you. Pecos gave everyone a toothy smile with an obvious implication. It was indeed us who defeated those shapeshifters, they weren't particularly difficult to deal with, Lancelot admitted straightforwardly, we need to get a map as soon as possible. Is there anything we can do? Oh, do you have any complaints about my rooms and food? The halfling innkeeper exclaimed dramatically, but Lancelot could easily tell the other was just putting on airs. They are fantastic, but they aren't free, Lancelot shrugged, we are a group of mercenaries, finding things is within our line of work. The Great Abyss is nothing like the open fields of the plains of the Abyss, Pecos chuckled, please trust the withered masters of Mogrondal City, they are certainly more anxious than you. I'm confident that artifact will soon return to its rightful room in Kyoin. Until then, why not stay here and trade your shiny gemstones for the top-notch services I offer? Lancelot knew there wouldn't be any more progress in the conversation, so he shifted the topic to some customs and cultures within Mogrondal City, then politely ended the conversation. Later that day, everyone gathered to discuss the next course of action, but unfortunately, they had too little information and ended up without a conclusion. Bruto did come up with an idea, to find out some information about the current Lords of Withering from the streets to see if it was possible for Lancelot to take one out directly. Doing so would definitely make participating in the search for the artifact's whereabouts, or acquiring a map afterward, no trouble at all for a Lord of Withering. Chapter 197. The plan sounded too crazy at first, and every dwarf shook their heads when it was first proposed, but when everyone tried to point out the absurdity of it, they realized that the plan was highly feasible. At least the first step of the plan, to investigate the current strength of the Lords of Withering, wasn't particularly difficult. If the final conclusion was that Lancelot was indeed capable of defeating a Lord of Withering, then nobody indulged in that possibility because they knew too little at the moment, whether it was about the title of Lord of Withering or the city itself. But tomorrow's course of action had been decided, which was to go out into the streets to gather all information related to the Lords of Withering. Despite it being a plan full of uncertainties, it was still better than being completely clueless, and it calmed everyone's nerves, which had been somewhat anxious. Bruto, Paladin, and Kola were soon overtaken by drowsiness, each had a bed to himself while the others rested in their own ways. Except for Ilithisia and Little Isha, one didn't need to sleep to regain her strength, and the other didn't sleep at night. It was only natural for them to take up the night watch for everyone. The two beautiful women were now squeezed onto a sofa, planning to chat until dawn, just as they had during their previous nights camping in the wild. Over the past 10 or so days of travel, their friendship had warmed up rapidly after a few such nights, and Ilithisia found herself quite fond of this naive and kind-hearted vampire girl, partly because she saw a reflection of herself in her. Lancelot, meanwhile, sat cross-legged in a quiet little room by himself, engaged in his daily meditation and chi cultivation. Everyone had become accustomed to the human knight's unique resting method, finding nothing odd about it anymore. In the 3 weeks they traveled from Twin Bridges town to this place, they hadn't encountered any battles of significant intensity, and Lancelot's true chi had fully recovered. He felt that he was just one breath away from reaching the great perfection of the chi cultivation stage, which was the best state to be in to attempt the foundation establishment stage. His true chi would not increase by even the slightest bit further than that. But so far, every time he completed a heavenly cycle, his true chi still increased by about 1/10,000th, a very small ratio, but one that didn't escape his keen spirit perception. Perhaps after the next heavenly cycle, he would find that the moment for foundation establishment had arrived, but until then, the human knight must steady his heart and repeat this process over and over. After completing 81 heavenly cycles, Lancelot stopped and entered a state of meditation. It wasn't physical fatigue that burdened him, but the mental exhaustion from using his spiritual power. According to the bamboo slip, the body, spiritual power, and divine sense are the three primary qualities of a spiritual cultivator, but there was no dharma method for cultivating divine sense during the chi refinement realm. Nevertheless, Lancelot felt that his divine sense did experience a slight increase after exhausting it through cultivation and then fully resting with meditation. The evidence was straightforward: the number of heavenly cycles he could withstand during each cultivation session was increasing. Meditation was a peculiar state. His consciousness was very clear, aware of the smallest movement around him. If he wished, the whisper-like conversation of little Isha and Ilithisia outside could be as clear as thunder. But he also felt as though he were asleep, barely perceiving the passage of time, with hours of meditation feeling like just a few minutes. That is, as long as nothing disturbed him. The sun's rays couldn't penetrate so deeply into the great abyss, but for some unknown reason, the luminescent fungi would synchronize with the sunrise and sunset on the surface, undergoing changes in brightness and darkness. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, at the dimmest moment of the fungi's light, Lancelot became aware of a large group of presences silently approaching. The human knight had many reasons to believe it wasn't an attack directed at them. For instance, the strict laws of the city, the prestige of the immortal Pecos, the deterrent of the inn's guards, and the low-key manner in which they entered the city. However, as those shadows started climbing the inn's rooftop, Lancelot knew he had to act. He immediately performed the spell for a soundproof barrier. His movements were not the slightest bit stiff despite having sat for an extended period. Once he confirmed that not a sound from the entire suite could leak out, he leaped up and rushed to the living room. What's happening? Ilithisia and little Isha looked perplexed at the human knight who had just run out, his hand clutching the cold, gleaming hand half-sword frost slash. We're under attack, Lancelot explained tersely. Go wake everyone up and get ready for battle. The two beautiful women, one tall and one short, immediately sprang into action. Having already proven the superiority of his perception ability over magic during their outdoor travels, they executed the human knight's commands without hesitation despite their confused expressions. Although the suite was luxurious and comfortable, it didn't have time to make everyone who had just spent 3 weeks in the wilderness let down their guard. Everyone got up immediately, and almost instinctively grabbed their weapons the moment they opened their eyes. What's going on? What's going on? Bruto was armed and ready in an instant, slipping into that dwarf heavy armor as easily as a cat jumps into boots. The other who needed to don armor for battle was not so lucky. Alamir struggled to get into his intricate yet heavy full-body armor, with Lord of Withering, Cromwell, assisting him and holding the elf's gauntlets in his mouth. We've got a lot of visitors, the kind that don't plan to come through the door. Lancelot glanced at Bruto. This living room is going to get very crowded soon. You go and stay with the scholar, and make sure you protect him. The dwarf nodded and turned to run back. Alamir finally got his armor on, which calmed the priest down. He went over to the halfling Kola, determined to protect his small companion in the upcoming battle. Ilithisia and little Isha also got ready back to back, with no one standing too far apart, maintaining a distance that allowed for mutual support. Apart from Lancelot, the human knight stood alone in the middle of the spacious living room. The group was experienced by now. When his frost slash started to swing, it was best to stand more than 15 feet away, or you would definitely be splattered with blood. That wall is the bathroom, Paladin tapped on Bruto's shoulder. Watch out for it later. Although the room's preparations were noisy, not a sound leaked out thanks to the soundproof barrier, with the attackers patiently waiting for their accomplices to arrive one by one. They were in vain with their impatience, for that roof made of solid rock wasn't something that could be destroyed with brute force. Chapter 198. Everyone followed Lancelot's gaze, staring intently at the ceiling above. After a wait that felt long but was actually only a few minutes, the ceiling suddenly became transparent, and ripples like water began to emanate from it. A few seconds later, the once solid rock ceiling had completely turned into an illusion. Accompanied by a whistle, the attackers leaped in from the rooftop. Lancelot took a closer look and realized these creatures had hyena heads, humanoid bodies, and an appalling stench. They were a band of gnoll robbers. Whatever their reasons for launching the attack, it definitely did not include the possibility that their opponents would be fully armed. Lancelot's long sword thrust out, and a gnoll hadn't even touched the ground before it became a corpse, a huge bloody hole gaping in its chest. The others also had a belly full of anger during those unbearable minutes of waiting. Bruto even threw his hammer the moment the first gnoll poked out its head, then, holding his shield, knocked another leaping gnoll to the ground. Without waiting for his hammer to return, he started pounding the enemy pinned beneath him with his fists. While he was passionately swinging his fists, Paladin was dueling another gnoll with a cold iron spear. These humanoid beasts created by the Abyssal Lord Yanagub possessed agility and strength that scholars couldn't match. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't stand a chance against such ferocious enemies, but these were not normal circumstances. Before the battle began, the scholar had ample time to prepare. Now, surrounding him were 3 illusions identical to himself, all, including his own body, appeared blurred, like a portrait smeared with water. The scholar had cast mirror image and blur on himself in advance, a golden combination of second circle spells for those spellcasters who liked melee combat. The former created 3 illusions with movements completely synced with his, the latter made the spellcaster and the illusions more elusive and harder to hit. Paladin's opponent was a brute waving a large cleaver. Though utterly baffled by the situation, it swung its weapon regardless. It was a badly misplaced hit, missing not only Paladin's clothes but even his illusion, while the scholar's sharp cold iron spear poked a hole in its left arm. The gnoll howled in pain, and under the torment, its weapon lashed out again. Although occasionally trained by Lancelot, the scholar still lacked real hand-to-hand combat experience. This time, the gnoll's large cleaver struck an illusion, passing through it without resistance, as it was striking nothing but an illusion. The illusion that was hit vanished into the air, yet its shoulder was stabbed once more. The gnoll told itself that the pain was like the spellcaster's illusions, non-existent. It let out a deep growl, pleased to see the mage in front of it looking tense and evidently scared of it. Just 2 more attacks, and there would be no more illusions to protect the mage. Then, a hammer suddenly coming from behind smashed the gnoll's head into its chest cavity. "You all right?" Bruto called out to Paladin across the gnoll's corpse. From the scholar's perspective, it looked as though the gnoll's body had grown a dwarf's head. "I could have handled it," Paladin shrugged. In another room, Kola and Alamir were also working together in a unique way. Whether it was the elves' shining hammers or their elegant, noble elf aura, both aroused the most intense revulsion in the ugly and filthy werewolf creatures. They recklessly swarmed the priest, who relied on his shield and the set of fine full-body armor to stubbornly fend off their attacks. In stark contrast, they couldn't help but overlook the presence of another enemy, a halfling woman with cute twin tails who seemed utterly harmless. The werewolves almost subconsciously averted their gaze. An insignificant halfling, what's there to worry about? Then they would busy themselves attacking the delicious-smelling elves, treating the halfling as if she had been completely forgotten. Only when a dagger sliced across the throat of a werewolf, its grubby and wart-ridden neck leaking life, would the victim wonder why they had ignored an armed enemy. Kola moved through the shadows in the corner of the room, easily reaping the lives of her foes. Direct combat was indeed not the halfling's strength, but this clever, short-statured race always found their way to coexist with the world. In the spacious living room, couches, chairs, and coffee tables had long been overturned, and Elithisia was fighting on one side of the room. Her cold iron longsword, decorated with angelic wings, dazzled with holy spiritual light, and any werewolf foolish enough to think this succubus was easy to handle soon fell before her. The only one not participating in the fight was a certain vampire. This was her first real battle in the truest sense. Little Isha had slipped into the shadows before the start of the fight, excited for the upcoming battle. However, when limbs and blood actually began to fly, she tensed up as if paralyzed, completely unable to move her body. The shock of real combat far exceeded her expectations. Exposed white bones, blood splattered everywhere, the death rattle of werewolves, all of these made the court-raised girl dizzy and short of breath. A werewolf was hit hard in the face by Cromwell, stumbled backwards towards her, then tripped over the body of a comrade and fell heavily in front of her. All she needed to do was to pull out the short sword from her waist to easily end the life of this enemy. Isha was well aware of this, but she simply couldn't control her body. Luckily, the werewolf was unable to notice the vampire wanderer behind it. From the perspective of stealth, Isha was flawless. If a vampire needed not breathe and added a petrify-like stillness, she had already blended with the shadows perfectly, so much so that even her companions couldn't find her. This meant that Cromwell was completely unaware that the young girl was there. The skull, like a flying bowling ball, careened between werewolf spears and large cleavers. After another vicious collision, yet another werewolf flew towards where the vampire girl was. Before Isha could react, the werewolf had already crashed into her. The beast seemed to sense that it had encountered something soft and couldn't help but turn its head to look. The girl's beautiful and delicate face reflected in its murky eyes, and the werewolf instinctively swiped its filthy claws at her. But that collision had finally given Isha back control over her body. Her hands instinctively drew the short sword from her waist, the right hand blocking the imminent blow, while the left hand swiftly stabbed under the enemy's chin, then quickly retracted to protect her chest. The werewolf retreated in panic, helplessly trying to cover the gushing wound on its throat, but quickly choked on the blood that flowed into its trachea. Its brown-gray skin swiftly turned purple due to lack of oxygen, its eyes bulging, and any violent motion only intensified its agony. Isha threw her short sword, accurately driving it into the beast's heart, ending its struggle. Feeling someone's gaze upon her, she looked up and caught Lancelot's encouraging eyes, but he immediately averted his gaze and lunged at another adversary. Maybe this isn't as hard as it seems, the vampire murmured to herself. She still disliked the feeling of killing and was certain she would never enjoy such acts, but she would no longer stand still like a statue while her companions were fighting. Chapter 199. The most relaxed person in the whole arena was, of course, Lancelot. The sword shadows of the human knight were like dried leaves swept up by a strong wind. Many werewolves had stopped breathing even before hitting the floor, not to mention striking him. However, these red-eyed werewolves, as if bewitched, kept swarming towards Lancelot. Perhaps the manipulator behind them wanted to wear out the human knight's stamina with sheer numbers, but with Lancelot's current strength, this intensity of battle could last an entire day without depleting his true chi. Bodies quickly piled up around Lancelot, gradually forming a low wall built of flesh and blood. Suddenly, the human knight sharply looked up, his gaze piercing through the phantasmal ceiling to a new figure that had appeared beside the eaves. The werewolves' attack on Lancelot ceased, driven by an unspoken command. They turned to assault the human knight's comrades instead. Lancelot confronted the figure on the rooftop from a distance. His spirit perception told him that this new black armor knight was the real threat tonight, even more intimidating than the serpent demon Sonam when calm. But having just massacred his enemies, the human knight was at the peak of his momentum. He lifted his sword towards the figure, issuing a precise invitation. The opponent did not ignore Lancelot's gesture. He too pointed his great sword at Lancelot, but unlike the human knight, this was not merely a symbolic action. In that moment, Lancelot felt as if he were before a court, facing a group of judges and prosecutors made of pure evil, loudly proclaiming Lancelot's guilt, the crime being the justice and goodness hidden within the human knight's heart. The Ice Heart Technique's mental method automatically engaged, and the illusion swiftly vanished from his sight, but Lancelot distinctly felt a mysterious connection being established between himself and the Black Armor Knight. In their ensuing battle, some pure evil would empower his opponent. Accompanied by a leaping motion, the Black Armor Knight initiated the battle with a fierce downward strike. Lancelot didn't dodge or evade, but met the attack with his sword from above. A loud clash of metal resounded. Aside from his unutilized innate true chi, Lancelot held nothing back in this strike. However, to his surprise, his opponent's strength was slightly superior, and instead of repelling the attack, he was forced to stagger backward. This was the first exchange in their tip-to-tip confrontation, and the side that was suppressed inevitably faced great disadvantages. But Lancelot was no longer the knight who once followed Albert. His agility and flexibility had far surpassed what they once were. The knight's upper body bent completely backward, dodging the blade that nearly schemed his chest. At the same time, he kicked upwards fiercely, his left foot striking the Black Armor Knight's forearm that held the sword, while his right foot brutally kicked his opponent's abdomen. The force of Lancelot's kick was comparable to Bruto's full-powered blow, sending the opponent stumbling backwards, while he himself used this opportunity to roll back onto his feet. The Black Armor Knight merely retreated 3 steps before stabilizing his stance. Lancelot's kick, powerful enough to shatter rocks, hadn't inflicted much damage, but it had fortunately allowed him to escape the disadvantage, re-establishing equal grounds for the duel. Lancelot was well aware that this was the most formidable enemy he had ever faced, but this realization only ignited his fighting spirit because his opponent was neither a demon weighing several times more than him nor a monster with multiple arms and tentacles. The opponent, like him, was also a human, also a knight. Lancelot urgently wanted to know who was stronger between him and his adversary, and he had an intuition that the Black Armor Knight was just as interested in the answer to this question. The two knights had confronted each other for only a moment before they immediately started clashing their weapons together again. The clanging of metal rang out ceaselessly, and amidst the fierce battle, the two seemed like some kind of marvelous music box, playing a symphony filled with destructive power in astonishing synchrony. But if there was even a slight mistake on either side, this symphony would not consist solely of the sounds of metal striking. Lancelot had already employed every trick in his arsenal, but he still couldn't gain the slightest advantage. His opponent's swordsmanship was not inferior to his in any way, and he possessed supernatural powers as well. The great sword of the Black Armor Knight emitted a filthy black light, matching the frost slash enhanced by the Qing Yuan sword technique in a fiercely equal battle. With a clang, their weapons collided again, and this time the blades didn't immediately separate but instead tangled tightly, testing the strength of each warrior's owner. The adversary wore a black giant helmet with a narrow eye slit, through which Lancelot saw a pair of eyes glowing red. He himself wasn't wearing a helmet because it would obstruct his vision, and for him at this moment, dodging was the most efficient form of defense. However, in a situation where neither side gave ground, trying to overpower the opponent, a helmet could also be used as a weapon. Lancelot and his opponent realized this at the same time. The Black Armor Knight's head slightly reclined, and Lancelot knew that in the next second, the adversary's helmet would smash into his nose. In response, he gathered a small portion of true chi in the sole of his right foot and stomped down heavily as his opponent's helmet harshly approached his face. With Lancelot as the center, the ground within 10 feet around violently shook as if struck like a drumhead. He leaned back, dodging the headbutt that nearly hit his face, while the opponent staggered due to the sudden tremor, both retreating several steps and returning to a standoff. Lancelot was breathing heavily. The situation just then had been extremely perilous. It definitely wouldn't have worked to simply take the headbutt, but if he leaned back to dodge, it would surely loosen his grip on the sword. In a contest of power like this, the one who was overpowered would end up in an extremely disadvantageous position, and being forced to the ground could mean real danger. Fortunately, using the earthquake technique, he successfully resolved the crisis. Before leaving for Oasis Fort, he had mastered this Earth System divine skill but had never experimented with how to integrate it into his usual combat style. This impromptu application proved to be extraordinarily effective. The temporarily separated duo fixed their gaze on each other, but the imminent battle was interrupted. Suddenly, the room's door was violently pushed open, and the innkeeper, who should have ensured the guests' safety, appeared followed by a large number of Miizeros demons, the ruthless enforcers of Abyssal City. "Nobody move!" The Miizeros demons shouted in the coarse language of the Abyss, and Lancelot knew this battle had now ended. Chapter 200. The Black Armor Knight turned his head to look over, then swiftly returned his gaze. He nodded at Lancelot as if to say goodbye. A vertical silver thin line appeared behind him, and then the Black Armor Knight was suddenly pulled away as if the end of that silver line was a fishing rod in the hands of a giant. Lancelot couldn't do anything to stop it. The remaining werewolves in the room stood frozen, as if they were just waking from a deep sleep, but the humanoid beetle demons didn't care about that, swiftly subduing them all. Even Lancelot's companions had to lay down their weapons and obediently stand aside. "We've heard that guests at the Tears of Lazaka need not worry about their safety," Lancelot said, watching Pecos approach him, "but our experience seems to suggest otherwise." "Really? I've never advertised that," the halfling replied, still dressed as an innkeeper and unarmed. "But we were indeed attacked in your room." "It's my inn that was attacked." The halfling kicked a corpse lying on the floor to face upwards, then bent down to examine the creature's decorations and tattoos, parasites from Beggar's Abyss. "Since you helped me repel the invaders, I won't ask for compensation for the broken furniture." Lancelot shrugged his shoulders. What else could he expect from an inn located in the Abyss? By this time, the insect-like maze-leth demons had finished their arrests and were beginning to withdraw from the room, the still living dozens of werewolves tied up and hanging from the spikes on their carapaces. Where are these werewolves going? To be tortured, beaten, interrogated, and not surprisingly, 1 or 2 will be skinned. After the guards have had their fun, they'll be allowed to confess the reasons for the attack, the masterminds behind it, and then they'll be sent to the slave pens, while I receive a negligible compensation. Pecos stood up from the ground, glanced at the dense circle of corpses by Lancelot's side, and raised an eyebrow at him. "I might have to reconsider your proposal given how well you fought." "Our proposal?" Lancelot asked, surprised. At that moment, some more people came in, Pecos's guards, who efficiently moved the bodies on the floor as well as the damaged furniture. "Once you've tidied up, go downstairs for breakfast, then find me in the office at the far end of the 2nd floor. Pecos followed his employees out. "About that thing you're so eager to find." "What's he talking about?" With the wall of corpses and the imposing humanoid beetles gone, Bruto finally stood beside Lancelot. "What else he wants us to help find that lost divine artifact." Paladin and the others came over too. He just refused our help last night, but it seems Lancelot's strength has made him change his mind. Everyone fought well just now. Lancelot nodded at the group, especially little Alicia. She defeated her first enemy. You've proven yourself to be a reliable partner, well done. Warm applause erupted. Everyone sent sincere congratulations to little Alicia, who shyly lowered her head and stuttered. I'll definitely keep trying. He'd finished speaking when, with a bang, he turned into a small bat and directly hid himself inside Lancelot's dimensional bag. Such shy creatures, young girls, Lancelot said, chuckling as if his own attendant had been officially knighted. What exactly is the deal with these werewolf people? Bruto brought the conversation back. Why were we targeted? And that knight in black armor, he was too powerful, wasn't he? It's the first time I've seen my brother take 2 big losses in a fight. That's not true. Lancelot protested unhappily. It was clearly a draw. I fear he was after me, said Ilithisia, breaking her silence. I know who he is. He was an assassin under my former master. You know him? It was Lancelot's turn to be surprised. What's his name? His name is Enrique, if I remember correctly, Ilithisia sighed. His story is a complete tragedy. He used to be a holy warrior just like me, hailed as the greatest hero in his kingdom for repelling the invasions of neighboring countries time and again. Isn't that a good thing? Bruto scratched his head. How did he end up looking like a ghost now? Riding on the fame of Enrique, his king realized he could invade other countries at will, which shocked and tired Enrique. Unwilling to be exploited by his king in such a manner, he resigned from the military and retreated to the forest to live with his wife and children. The tone of the succubus paladin began to turn painful, but one day upon returning from hunting, he found his beloved lying in a pool of blood, her heart pierced with a dagger bearing the royal insignia of the neighboring country. Add latest chapters at fortuitous only. And then? Alamir asked curiously, was he blinded by revenge and took his anger out on innocent civilians of the neighboring country? Darker than that, the succubus paladin shook her head. The king soon sent envoys, inviting him to lead the upcoming conquest against a neighboring territory, which raised his suspicions. After investigating, the truth quickly surfaced. The dagger that killed his wife and children indeed came from the neighbor's royal family, but it had been gifted to his king as a peace offering, merely setting the stage for a play to draw him out of retirement. Bruto glanced at Lancelot. Brother, I'm not targeting you but you humans really can do such things. Lancelot did not reply, his mind pondering a man with blonde hair and a cape adorned with a gold griffin. What happened next? Kola asked eagerly. Did he confront his king? He did, but he learned even more despairing news. Ilithisia sighed again. The assassination was approved by the city council. Those very people he spent his life protecting were willing to sentence his wife and children to death for the profits of war. They even prepared several beautiful women in advance, believing if Enrique found out the true nature of the event, these women could quell his rage. I guess those women were of no use, Paladin remarked. His faith as a holy warrior crumbled. He drew his long sword and killed every person he could find in the capital. When the people who had hidden under beds and in basements trembled as they returned to the blood-stained streets the next day, Enrique had vanished. The expression of the succubus paladin was filled with disgust. Those women were actually several succubi, who took Enrique to Flameth Demon Yiltu, my former master. It was there he was transformed, turning into a dark guardian who fought only for slaughter and evil. Chapter 201. Transformation? Is that the reason for his power? Lancelot was still brooding over his failure to defeat Enrique, and upon hearing this, he asked, what exactly is a dark guardian? When a holy warrior completely abandons the sacred oaths once sworn, they can transform into a dark guardian through a series of evil rituals such as sacrificing innocent souls, swearing new oaths of darkness, and forging pacts with powerful fiends. The succubus paladin glanced at Lancelot. All the skills, divine arts, and spiritual light that were used to fight evil will transform into versions that sow destruction and evil. However, this doesn't grant any additional strength, other than the freedom to act without moral constraints. Well, it seems his strength was already that formidable, Lancelot shrugged. He's practically your opposite, Paladin exclaimed to Ilithisia. You were a succubus, he was a beloved holy warrior. You seek redemption for yourself, while he has walked the path of the fallen. Sending him to hunt you must be particularly ironic for your former master. His power is indeed very strong, I certainly stand no chance against him alone. Ilithisia looked apologetically at the group. I'm really sorry for bringing such a dangerous enemy upon you all. Bah, he's just a fallen human. I dared to face a six-armed serpent demon to rescue you. Of course, she was gravely injured at the time. Lancelot joked, then turned serious, don't you get any weird ideas? We're helping you because we respect your choices, your journey. In some ways, helping you is helping ourselves. When I first set out on this path, I braced for all the difficulties, but I never anticipated receiving such an overwhelming amount of support. The succubus paladin's face showed a complex expression. Thank you, truly. Don't mention it, Lancelot waved a hand nonchalantly. As for that dark guardian, he and I aren't finished yet. I'm sure he won't give up so easily. Next time we meet, I'll have to settle the score and prove that I am the strongest human knight in the abyss. Gurgle gurgle. Bruto made protesting noises from his belly, interrupting Lancelot's grand declarations. We've been up since early morning getting a good workout, haven't we? The dwarf looked around somewhat embarrassed. The innkeeper mentioned breakfast, right? That's right, I heard it too, Kola chimed in. Does our room rate include breakfast? No, Lancelot spread his hands in resignation, but our wallets are heavy enough already. That's the spirit of living, the halfling laughed and was the first to head for the room's door, the necessary route to the dining hall. In the dining hall, there were others. Before Lancelot's shadow appeared at the staircase's turn, the place below sounded like a bar fight in full swing, but the moment he sat down, a cryptic silence enveloped the surroundings, and the crisp clinking of cutlery against plates from their table became the lone sound in the air. People gazed at Lancelot with awe. The inn's guards, who had moved the bodies, had spread what they had seen. Everyone had also seen the stack of bodies carried down from upstairs, undeniable proof that silently attested to the immense power of this tall human knight. In this cryptic atmosphere, they finished their breakfast with utmost speed. 10 minutes later, the group pushed open a heavy door on the second floor of the inn, entering a room completely devoid of windows. This was the office of the former Lord of Withering, the immortal Pecos. A chandelier hung from the ceiling, burning with blue magic flames. The walls were lined with many shelves and cabinets, piled with scrolls of dubious material, various magical artifacts flickering with strange spiritual light, and numerous skulls of unidentifiable creatures. Those skulls might have once belonged to some enemy of Pecos, but now they had become part of the innkeeper's collection. Or perhaps cups. Welcome to my office, the innkeeper said, seated behind the central desk in the room, which now seemed too large for his current form. Lancelot noticed that there were no chairs or sofas in the room. Anyone who came to see him had to stand. First, I have some news for you. According to those werewolf people, a rumor started circulating in Beggar's Abyss a few days ago, claiming that a succubus with black hair and red pupils will bring a very wealthy human knight to Mogrondal. The human has a height of 6.5 feet, black hair, and blue eyes. Pecos's fingers rhythmically tapped on the table. Sounds quite familiar, doesn't it? So how wealthy does the rumor claim I am that these creatures dared attack your inn? Lancelot skillfully countered. No amount of wealth could explain their stupidity, Pecos shrugged. Those werewolves argue they were controlled by a guy in black armor. They wouldn't have the guts to do such a thing without that excuse, clearly made up to avoid being sent to the slave pen. Who would believe them? That guy is indeed one of our enemies. Lancelot didn't bother to hide this fact, as the one in front of him had already encountered the knight in black armor. But I believe he won't be bothering us again anytime soon. Yet my reputation has been tangibly damaged. The halfling proprietor jumped onto the table. You must compensate me. What reputation? That guests need not fear being attacked in their rooms. Bruto interjected quizzically, but Lancelot knew the dwarf was doing so deliberately. Perhaps I didn't make myself clear. Pecos leveled his gaze at Lancelot. I invite you to act as my representatives in the search for the Eye of Sarazdan. Aren't you eager to obtain the map and leave this city? If you successfully find the divine artifact, you'll certainly be the first to get the map. We have no objections, Lancelot nodded. But what about you? What do you stand to gain? Do you plan to settle down in this city for the long term? No, we have no such plans. Then it's none of your business. Pecos settled back into his chair. How about it? Any other questions? Many, like where do we start looking for the Eye of Sarazdan? Chapter 202. Ha! If I knew that, would I need you? Pecos took a small emblem out from the table and tossed it in front of Lancelot. The only known piece of information right now is that the divine artifact definitely hasn't fallen to somewhere deeper than this city. otherwise some of the old monsters in the tower would have sensed it. What's this for? Lancelot picked up the emblem, discovering it was a pure gold ring with a dragon wing symbol on it. This is my emblem. In certain situations where you need to show it, it can prove that you are my agents. The halfling leaned back into his chair in a comfortable position. The guards of Kyoin are waiting for the person holding it to show up. I suggest you set off as soon as possible. Who knows, if you're late, some other guy might find it, right? Lancelot, with a hint of suspicion, stared at this individual who was far more dangerous than he appeared, but ultimately nodded and turned to walk towards the door. Oh, and one more thing. Pecos's voice rose from behind them, if you're lucky and do find that thing, don't take it lightly. Some folks may not wish for the divine artifact to return to this city. Lancelot turned his head, looking once again at the deceptively adorable halfling, then silently walked out. What was that last remark about? A few seconds later, Bruto couldn't help but speak up first. Think about it, without the assistance of a mole, how could a bunch of outsider shapeshifters steal a divine artifact that's guarded so heavily just by having an anti-magic stone? Paladin explained to the dwarf, it's very likely that there's a traitor among the high circles of this city, it could well be one of the Lords of Withering. So it means that if we do find the artifact, a Lord of Withering might suddenly pop up, clamoring to kill us to silence us. Bruto scratched his head, so we still have to take one down, right? The group exchanged glances. What was Bruto's plan again from yesterday? It indeed contained such content. Everyone initially thought his idea was too crazy, and even after a thorough discussion, they only considered it a last resort. We don't fight battles unprepared, let's take some time first to gather information on a few of the current Lords of Withering. Lancelot spoke up. But by now, probably everyone in the city has heard about what happened at the Tears of Lazaka. Ilithisia said with a frown, you'll be easily recognized. Under such circumstances, inquiring for information might attract a lot of unnecessary attention. That problem is easy to solve. Lancelot pulled out his succubus transformation ring. You can accept the fact that for the time being, you're not the most beautiful in the team, right? Ah! Ilithisia looked at Lancelot with a puzzled face, then her confusion turned into shock, and the shock into some kind of bizarre smile. I can accept that. The succubus paladin seemed to be struggling not to burst into laughter, although there is still a tiny bit of disappointment. That's indeed the fact. The investigation went much smoother than everyone anticipated. Due to the method with which a Lord of Withering came into being, just kill the current one, news about these lords was the most favorite gossip among the citizens. Many believed that at some certain opportune moment, they too could become a Lord of Withering. People didn't even need to ask around intentionally, all they had to do was listen carefully, and they would hear enough information. The governor of Sprayfield was the great arbitrator Satagura, an abyssal fox-headed demon noted for its shape-shifting and linguistic abilities. It was said that before becoming a Lord of Withering, he had been an intelligence trafficker, always friendly to merchants, mercenaries and adventurers who came to the abyss, willing to pay a reasonable price for any manner of things. The governor of Blood Abyss Outlook was shapeshifter Lady Akama, who had held the title of Lord of Withering the longest among all current incumbents. Rumor had it that her true form was some kind of aquatic demon with hard carapace and lobster claws, who took pleasure in seducing attractive men. At a special moment during the act of lovemaking, she would transform back into her true form and devour her partner's brain in one gulp. Lancelot was sure he needed to stay vigilant around this shapeshifter. The governor of Hive Valley was the Impaler Dugba, a beetle demon who had just acquired the title of Lord of Withering and was seen patrolling his domain daily with a big group of minions. The skin-stripped corpse of its predecessor was hanging on the fences of the Hive Valley Bazaar, believed to deter any potential challengers. Many citizens thought this brutal dimwit had, at most, another 2 weeks to live. And the governor of Beggar's Cliff was the Digger Vegramari, a fire-burn demon. By finding a powerful magic wand in some ruins, he seized control of Beggar's Cliff. After his successful ascension, Vegramari hardly ever left his lair in Beggar's Cliff, leading many to speculate that the magic wand had lost its power, yet they all expected someone else to go and confirm this firsthand. Among these 4 current Lords of Withering, was there really someone who had betrayed the city? Who was the most likely candidate? With such questions in mind, they arrived at Blood Abyss Outlook. The foundation of Skeleton Tower at Kyoin was here. Blood Abyss Outlook was Mogrondal's wealthy district. Unlike the city's other broad districts, it expanded in a vertical direction. Along one entire cliff face, there were luxurious caves and majestic high towers. The caves mostly belonged to those cunning and wealthy abyssal fox-head demons, while the high towers were owned by winged demon races like the Caste demons, bulky demons, or Nikaros demons. Across the chasm of the Great Abyss, on the opposite side of the district was Sprayfield, offering a prime viewing angle. The demons residing here could admire the majestic scenery of the Blood River waterfall from their homes while counting the wealth they had accumulated over countless centuries. Naturally, this place was heavily guarded and strictly forbade entry to outsiders. But thanks to the pure gold emblem given by the immortal Pecos, they were still able to enter the district smoothly just with a whole team of humanoid beetles eagerly trailing behind them, hoping for these outsiders to make any untoward move. Lancelot did not indulge these sadists. He led the group straight through the only narrow path in Blood Abyss Outlook and came to the base of Skeleton Tower at Kyoin. When they had first come to the city, the giant waterwheel beneath the Blood River waterfall had already proven the engineering capabilities of the demons, but it paled in comparison to the foundation of Kyoin. Countless abyssal metal cables and struts secured the gigantic spine to the cliffs of the Great Abyss, stretching for miles. But this was not enough to support the tower over 20 miles high. The true structural supports were the countless bone spurs that penetrated deeply into the cliff. Looking at the nauseatingly spine-like silhouette of the skeleton tower, Lancelot suddenly had an intuition that the tower was actually some kind of living thing, and the huge, tangled metal apparatus surrounding its base served only to anchor the structure securely within Mogrondal. Chapter 203. However, they weren't there to dig up any truths today. The more you know about such matters, the worse it is, no matter what plane of existence you are on. After showing the golden badge provided by Pecos again, the Maziros demon guard at the pedestal base allowed everyone to pass and directed them to ascend the stairs to a place called the Hall of Contention. Each level of the skeleton tower may differ slightly in size, but its structure is completely identical. It's roughly what a vertebrae bone would look like if hollowed out. For countless centuries, various demons have occupied it, and each level has been decorated to its master's liking, though interrogation rooms and cells are the most common. As the party ascended from one floor to the next, the stench of blood and flesh never dissipated from the air, and sharp yet brief screams emanated from behind some tightly shut doors on occasion. The one who reacted most violently to this was Ilithisia. Although she had never set foot inside the skeleton tower, this place was still enough to trigger many of her memories. In those memories, she was not the victim but the tormentor, and it was this fact that made her feel even worse. Although not as proficient and efficient as the demons' creativity in torture is unrivaled by any other race. When the demon lord captured a mortal hero, he would first use abilities to peer into the victim's memories, then have his succubi take on the appearance of the captive's lover, tricking the hero into believing their beloved had been captured while trying to rescue them, followed by torturing the lover before their eyes. In some cases, the pain inflicted in such a manner even surpassed that of torturing the prisoner directly. Alternatively, they would use magic to create an illusionary realm where the prisoner believed their lover had successfully rescued them. After a confounded celebration, the succubi would only need a few days to give birth to a multitude of children. When the cruel truth was revealed to the prisoner, the demons would laugh wildly as they consumed the prisoner's crying children one by one, a scene capable of shattering any creature's soul. Each time she recalled these scenes, Ilithisia would be engulfed in intense shame, remorse, and fury, gasping for breath as if drowning. Lancelot noticed the succubus paladin's distress and also faintly guessed the reasons behind it. So he quickened his pace, pulling along the scholar, who would have gladly studied each piece of the floor had he the chance, to quickly reach the place the guards had directed them to. This place, called the Hall of Contention, resembled a council hall, with a high platform on one side, and on the other three sides, there were stepped seats, which at this moment were filled with individuals looking much like those accompanying Lancelot. Some showed indifference to the arrivals of the human knight and his party, but some began whispering secretly among themselves. "Is it this fellow that looks like a tin can? Look closely, that's Mithril. Pretty wealthy, hey. Heard he brought in at least 24 werewolf corpses. Looks like the guards of the Spray Plains will be having that for the next week." Lancelot's keen hearing easily picked up these conversations. He furrowed his brow, but there wasn't much he could do. In this city, it was nothing unusual for brawls to break out, armed or otherwise, in any tavern or inn, save for the Tears of Lazaka. Surely more than a couple of eyes had seen the pile of corpses stacked like a low wall around him, and by now many would undoubtedly have been keeping a watchful eye on him in the shadows. The mercenaries seemed to be waiting for something, so Lancelot and his companions also took their place in an open space. Many malicious gazes surreptitiously watched them, but the human knight met them one by one with a sharp glance, unequivocally conveying a "I've spotted you" message, causing all those who thought they were concealed to guiltily withdraw their stares. After about an hour of waiting, during which new mercenaries kept arriving and soon filled up all the seats in the hall, it became a tense situation. Among the mercenaries, there were those prone to petty theft or who were extremely arrogant, and most of them only knew how to resolve any conflict with violence. Lancelot estimated that in no more than 5 minutes, the floor of the hall would be sprinkled with fresh blood, so he silently drew his giant sword Glacier. When the exaggeratedly large sword made its appearance, everyone's attention was drawn to it. Lancelot casually placed it on the ground, and as the sword touched down, it emitted a deep thunderous roar, a sound more persuasive than any words, sufficient to make any troublemaker think thrice before acting. But should chaos truly erupt, no one would probably care about the intimidating power of the sword. Luckily, the arrival of 3 figures descending from the upper steps returned calm to the hall. Lancelot looked up and saw a well-dressed male blonde elf, a scantily clad female demon with dark red skin, and a beetle-shaped demon with huge ramming horns standing on the high platform. Murmurs spread through the crowd once again, and Lancelot knew that these individuals on the platform were probably the Great Arbiter Satagura, Shapeshifter Lady Akama, and Piercer Dugba. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am Satagura, welcome to the Hall of Contention," the blonde elf began, his voice exceptionally authoritative. "You must have all heard about the theft of the Eye of Surisden. The significance of this item to our city is obvious, and I need to retrieve it. You make it sound so easy, Fox. What's the reward? Yet, we don't work for free. Who doesn't know that it's a divine artifact? If the reward isn't satisfying, even if I find it, I won't give it to you. My treasury is still lacking a divine artifact level collectible. That item is useless to you. It provides no power and has no magic effects. None of you here, including the 3 of us, possess the bloodline power required to use it," said the elf, his expression turning sour after being called a fox, but he controlled his anger. "Only some special beings can use this item to draw maps that are critical to trade activities. Maybe some abyssal lord is interested in that thing," someone shouted from the crowd. "Lord Wuan is always generous to those who help him." "Right. Having real-time access to the location of these portals, one could mobilize legions through the Great Abyss for surprise attacks. Mikan Shut might soon have to move into the Silver Palace." Silence. A roar erupted, and the huge beetle on the platform spoke up, its voice as grating as fingernails scraping across metal. Everyone covered their ears in agony, and the demand of the Lord of Withering was thus met. Chapter 204. "I don't care what use that black bead has, I only know that without it, there would be fewer merchants paying taxes, and I don't like that situation," proclaimed the Lord of Hive Valley, Piercer Dugba, raising its blade like 4 limbs. "If any of you dares to hide that thing, I will personally twist his head off, suck his brains dry, eat the flesh off his face clean, and shove the remaining skull up his ass." The beetle demon seemed ready at any moment to prove its threats were real, and the mercenaries below wisely shut their mouths. But Lancelot had no doubt that many did not take the threat seriously at all. "Of course, there will also be rewards," the only female on the platform spoke up, her voice carrying an enticing magnetism. That was Shapeshifter Lady Akama, the ruler of the Great Abyss. "Anyone who brings back the Eye of Surisden will be granted the title Lord of Withering Honor and given the nobility status of Mogrondal." Whispering voices stirred again, quickly followed by an unhappy shout. "What good is this blasted title? This title is more precious than gold and gemstones. The city guards will not attack you, and are willing to serve you, provided the pay is reasonable." Akama's face broke into a charming smile. "I believe many caravans will need your protection. Or perhaps you'd prefer to venture further and breach into a certain Lord of Withering's lair." Heh. Thinking of this lady's well-known vile hobby sent shivers down Lancelot's spine. Although the female demon's words were laden with innuendo, she clearly wasn't referring to herself but to some unseen, allegedly weaker fireburn demon. The mercenaries were much happier with this response, many of them glancing around menacingly as if to scare off potential competitors with their gazes. "So how do we find it?" someone in the crowd asked aloud, unable to contain themselves. "Where exactly did the divine artifact fall?" "It wouldn't be far from Kyoin, but it could be anywhere from here to the plains of the Abyss." Akama pressed a mechanism on the platform, and suddenly a portal pulsing with blue light appeared in the hall. She introduced to everyone, "This portal will transport you randomly to any level of Kyoin, your luck from here on is your own. You know without me saying, there's only one bounty." No sooner had she finished speaking than someone rushed into the portal as if the divine artifact was just beyond waiting for him. Seeing this, other mercenaries also surged forward, the scene quickly turning into utter chaos, with some even drawing swords on each other to gain the right to enter first. Wait! Wait! We still have things to say. A lord of Withering with a fox's head shouted from the platform, but to no avail. He turned to the tempting female demon beside him and complained, "What did I say? You must leave the payment to the end." The giant beetle demon moved. It leapt forward suddenly, its massive body smashing heavily in front of the portal, a dead body already hanging from the sharp horns on its head. The killed mercenaries' companions immediately drew their weapons, but their swords could only leave slight scratches on the Lord of Withering's carapace. Piercer Dugba shook off its massive horns, easily creating several more broken bodies. Violence and death, the two most persuasive elements in the lower planes. The chaotic hall had finally quieted down once again. Satagura, with his fox-like head, cleared his throat and drew everyone's attention before pouring a pile of magic wands out of his dimensional bag. This magic wand has been imbued with detect magic by several spellcasters who witnessed the Eye of Surisdan and completed it overnight. It can be used 3 times, he explained, showcasing the slender wand, less than half a foot long. Due to the suppression of prophecy magic within the Great Abyss, its detection range is only about 1,000 feet, so please reserve its use for suspicious locations. How is 3 times enough? Someone in the crowd shouted again discontentedly, how are we supposed to know which places are suspicious? This bead can absorb the surrounding light, creating a noticeable darkness around it, the shapeshifter Akama interjected. If any of you truly find it, you'll understand what I mean. All right, we have said all we needed to say. The fox-headed demon clapped his hands, gesturing for his colleagues in front of the portal to make way. Come get a magic wand from me one by one if you could, Q, that would be even better. There's no need to waste your lives here as the area in need of searching is vast. Expecting these increasingly impatient mercenaries to queue was naturally impossible. Many people rushed to the platform, grabbed a magic wand, and ran into the portal. Besides the desire for the bounty, the experience of staying with a large group of mercenaries was also terrible. Akin to smoking in a goblin workshop, it was better to leave early. With Lancelot from Twin Bridges town controlling the crowd, the mercenaries were naturally calm and collected. They weren't overly interested in the so-called bounty, they just wanted the divine artifact to quickly return to Mogrondal, so they could continue their journey to Androlina. But they didn't wait until the very last either. Once most of the eager mercenaries had noisily left, order in the hall quickly resumed. Seeing that the area around the platform was no longer crowded, Lancelot stood and led everyone forward. You must be Sir Lancelot. As he approached the platform to collect the detect magic wand, the fox-headed demon lord took the initiative to greet him. Yes, that's me. Lancelot hesitated for a moment but nodded in acknowledgement. Hearing his response, the other 2 lords of Withering also turned their heads to scrutinize him. The massive beetle demon looked provocatively at the human knight, the meaning in its gaze was clear. But Lancelot had no interest in responding to such a look. The seductive female demon initially eyed him with a teasing expression, but, noticing Elethisia behind the human knight, her eyes turned to annoyance, as if her favorite food had been slobbered on by someone else. I heard it was you who dealt with those thieves, and you encountered some unpleasantness in my district earlier today. The current governor of the Spraying region seemed to have a good impression of Lancelot. He glanced at the cloak on Lancelot's body. You are from Twin Bridges town? I have travelled there with a caravan and have even interacted with Lady Tajana. Chapter 205. May victory and glory be hers, Lancelot replied cautiously, before explaining, we're on a commission that requires us to go to various lower-level maps, and now it seems we have no choice but to find the Eye of Surisdan. Indeed, I'm glad we can share the same interests, Satagura said with an uncomfortable smile on his fox-like face, and he grabbed 3 magic wands from the table. Here, take them. I believe in the abilities of the Twin Bridges town mercenaries, you'll certainly bring me a pleasant surprise. There's a saying in the bamboo slips about spiritual cultivation. The gratuitous offer of help is from none other than a plotter or a thief, which couldn't be more apt to describe how Lancelot felt right now. His spirit perception didn't notice anything amiss for the moment, so he cautiously took the magic wand. However, he still kept an eye out and decided to let the scholar study them later for any possible trickery. Good luck to you. Lancelot nodded his head and then, with everyone joining hands, they all stepped into the portal together. This portal was clearly special. Passing through it felt just like walking through an ordinary door, without the brief dizziness that usually accompanied teleportation. Lancelot looked around and found himself standing in a spacious hall, akin in structure to the Hall of Conflict they'd been in before. The portal they had come through was in the same location and was now gradually fading away behind them. The noise of their arrival had alerted the local guards, and 2 demons quickly flew over from a corner. Lancelot looked up to see muscular demons with humanoid forms, filthy and rotting wings sprouting from their backs, pallid skin like that of a corpse, arms ending in eagle-like claws, and a bald round head with not a single hair, but an extra red eye in the forehead. These were strapping demons, said to be directly born from the bloodline of a demon monarch through a bloody ritual. Compared to ordinary demons, they had a certain level of obedience and were favored by many demon lords. Of course, the only thing that could command their obedience was strength. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" one of the demons asked roughly and with hostility, though he did not attack immediately, obviously due to the way the group had appeared. "We are a group of mercenaries. The Lord of Withering Below has hired a bunch of folk just like us to help them find a black bead in the Great Abyss," Bruto said nonchalantly. "You wouldn't happen to know where that thing is, would you? Satagura sent you to find the Eye of Sarisdan." The demons looked at them with suspicion but stepped aside. "Get out through that door. Without the protection of this tower, the Great Abyss will swallow you whole, and we'll enjoy watching that happen. Hey, how long have you been stuck in this god-forsaken place? Can't you at least try to be a bit hospitable?" Bruto swaggered towards the exit the demons had pointed out. As soon as he stepped out of the great door, a terrifying scream suddenly pierced the sky, and a Flomo that appeared from nowhere plunged down from high above, swiping its sharp claws at Bruto. The dwarf was slightly stunned by the scream and, by the time he reacted, the claws were almost scratching his face. Luckily, he raised his shield almost instinctively, blocking the vicious strike, but the immense force of the impact sent the dwarf tumbling backward, falling awkwardly back into the interior of Skeleton Tower. The Flomo immediately rushed in. Lancelot was about to draw his sword to support the dwarf, but 2 burly demons following the dwarf to the exit moved faster. The moment the Flomo entered, they pounced fiercely, one on each side, pinning the intruder to the ground, and then, with their terrifying strength, they ripped the Flomo's wings right off. The wingless demon also lost its only hope of escape. The burly demons swung their massive claws, tearing the luckless creature, maddened by bloodlust, into shreds. "Who said there are no birds shitting here? There are lots of birds here," taunted the first burly demon who had spoken with the group, biting off a large chunk of flesh from the Flomo's thigh. "You did quite a job there, how about another go? We can split a couple of claws or half an arm with you." "I was just ambushed," the dwarf argued, his face red. "What's wrong with that?" "We ambushed it too," said another burly demon, its claws rummaging through the prey's belly, throwing dripping entrails into its mouth. "We can't leave this tower, at least not from here. You brought a little fun to our boring time, so we bless you, wishing your death in the Great Abyss to be swift and painless." Should I say thank you?" Bruto was somewhat confused by these words that sounded like both a curse and a blessing. At that moment, Lancelot came over, patted the dwarf on the shoulder, and said to the 2 burly demons indulging in their feast, "Thank you for your assistance. If we want to get back to Mogrondal, how do we open that portal?" "We can help you open that portal, and the price is 1,000 gold coins, or any equivalent item," said one burly demon, wiping the blood from the corner of its mouth, showing Lancelot a nauseating smile. "But what use is money to us? If you can provide us with some entertainment, like luring a few Flomos or cast demons here, opening that portal for free would be fine." "I understand," Lancelot nodded and then led the group to get their equipment in order, passing through the exit of Kyoin and stepping into the unique blood-red mist of the Great Abyss. This time, without unexpected attackers, the party stood safely on a narrow mountain path, surrounded by an exceptionally perilous environment, on one side a nearly vertical cliff face, on the other an abyss whose bottom was out of sight. On the opposite side was another nearly vertical cliff, in places only tens of feet away from where the group stood and at others, thousands of feet wide. The cliffs were dotted with horizontal paths, and some ancient arch bridges connected the sides, but there were no natural pathways in the vertical direction. For travelers without the power of flight, changing elevation required finding an area less steep to climb while also being vigilant for attacks from the indigenous residents. The cliff was less than 5 feet away, and exploring this area, the greatest danger was the potential to slip and fall. With some luck, one might end up with a relatively nasty fall, but with bad luck, one might not even find the body. Of course, another concern was something falling from above, like another unfortunate soul who had slipped and plummeted. Chapter 206. Lancelot felt the urge to put on the transformation ring again, to grow wings on his back. No, to make his body grow wings. However, after a brief contemplation, he restrained that impulse. With his adept manipulation of true qi, he could perform glide-like maneuvers in the air, so falling wasn't so dangerous to him. Transforming into a succubus would somewhat affect his combat ability, which was not a good choice in this strange and perilous environment. "Everyone, take one of these," Kola said as she opened her mouth, and everyone turned to her, noticing the halfling pulling out several bottles of pale blue potion from her bag. "What is this?" Paladin curiously took one. "Pale blue, is it related to the transformation system?" "Exactly, it's a potion imbued with the effects of the feather fall spell, but don't drink it now." Kola stopped the dwarf, who immediately unscrewed the cap and was about to pour it down his throat. "Its effect lasts only 1 minute, so use it only when necessary, and keep it where you can reach it easily." "What's the use of that?" Bruto complained. "I can't predict if I will fall off a cliff within a minute. If the height of the fall is enough to be fatal, you completely have time to drink this potion before hitting the ground," the halfling explained with a relaxed expression. "In an emergency, you could also just crush it, and the part of your body that touches the potion will gain the feather fall spell effect, and then hold onto your other parts of the body. You can still avoid injury from a fall, though it's not a pleasant experience." "I'd still better be careful not to fall," the dwarf shrugged and pocketed the potion. The others did the same, except for those with the ability to fly: Alethisia, Cromwell, and little Esha, who was adjusting to the time change in Lancelot's pocket. Vampires could die in many ways, but falling was definitely not one of them. With a simple action, a vampire could transform into a bat or even a mist. "What do we do next?" The dwarf looked at the canyon shrouded in red mist. "They say the bead absorbs light from its surroundings, but this damn mist makes it impossible to see anything. I'm afraid we have to search along the mountain path bit by bit." Paladin walked to the edge of the cliff, looked down and quickly recoiled. "Now the question is, from which direction should we start? Pick a side and rely on luck. Don't you have some magic that could give us a hint?" Bruto looked at the scholar expectantly. "Unfortunately, no," the scholar shrugged. "Many spells do not function properly in the Great Abyss, including teleportation and prophecy spells. Normally, the detection spell can cover several miles, but the magic wand given by the abyss-headed demon has only 1,000 feet of range, and its creator is probably much stronger than me. Maybe my divine arts could be of some help," Alamir chimed in eagerly. "I know a second circle divine art, divination. It can predict whether what we're about to do in the next 30 minutes is good or bad. Shall we try it?" "That amazing." Bruto's interest was piqued. "How do you do it?" "It's simple, like if I decide to go in that direction." Alamir pointed arbitrarily, then he took out a gold coin and flicked it into the air. "If the side with the number is up, it's auspicious; if the side with the text is up, it's ominous." The gold coin spun rapidly in the air, then bounced twice on the ground. When it finally landed the last time, the gold coin stood upright on the ground, then rolled over the edge of the cliff and disappeared into the abyss. "Wow," Cromwell, floating in midair, couldn't help but express his admiration. "It's the first time I've seen such precise divination." It's my first time encountering this situation," the elf scratched his head awkwardly. "Shall I try it again?" "As far as I know, the accuracy of divination decreases throughout the day, and the hint you've already got seems pretty clear." The skull wagged its head. "Undoubtedly, our target is below us, we should head downward. But this divine art doesn't actually indicate direction, it only predicts the goodness or badness of our choice." Alamir spread his hands helplessly. "I guess we really just have to pick any direction and try our luck." "I also know some divination techniques, let me try," Lancelot suddenly spoke up, recalling a very mysterious method of divination recorded on a small bamboo strip. "Let's give it a try, since we don't have any leads right now." Paladin looked skeptically at him. "But can your strange bloodline power do this too?" "It has nothing to do with my bloodline power, it's just a small trick I learned by chance." Lancelot also took out a coin from his pocket. "It is said this method can predict anything from the birth and destruction of the universe to the sex of a baby in a pregnant woman's womb, though there's no guarantee of accuracy." Naturally, the others had no objections, so Lancelot flicked the coin into the air, and after a few seconds, the coin landed on the ground, text side up. "The backside," Paladin commented. "What does that mean?" "We're not finished yet." Lancelot drew 2 short lines on the ground with the tip of his sword, then picked up the coin and tossed it again, drawing either a long line or 2 short lines based on the result. Each time he repeated this process 6 times, a strange symbol consisting of several lines appeared on the ground. "I've never seen divination done this way," Cromwell looked curiously at the human knight, frowning in thought. So what's the result? I don't quite understand either. Probably northward. Lancelot was silent for a while, then finally said, this is called hexagram. Through 6 predictions, the result is called a hexagram. There are 64 possible combinations, each with a special meaning, but interpreting them is very difficult. How did you know it's northward? Paladin looked curiously at the symbol on the ground. As a scholar of mystical knowledge, he was quite curious. The 3 lines at the bottom make up the inner trigram, and the 3 lines on top make up the outer trigram. The inner trigram represents the current state of the matter being divined, and the outer trigram represents the way the matter will develop. Lancelot explained to the others, each hexagram can have many meanings. For example, the inner trigram of this prediction represents the north direction, the earth, midnight, transformation, and women, among other things. Chapter 207. That doesn't sound very reliable. Paladin stroked his chin. What does that symbol made up of 3 lines represent then? Northwest, mountain range, stillness, extinction, grave. Lancelot shrugged his shoulders. I guess it should mean the mountain range here, right? The thing we're looking for has obviously fallen into the valley. The vaguer the meaning, the easier it is to find a corresponding interpretation afterwards. Alamir was not very convinced by this. If it were about praying to the gods, one would either get no response at all or receive clear instructions. Lady Firehair would not provide an ambiguous answer. Agreed. In theory, this method is of directly inquiring of heaven and earth, who knows how the world itself views the issue. Lancelot spread his hands, offering no rebuttal to the elf's comment. So shall we head towards the north to try our luck? Why not? Your intuition is always accurate. The impatient Bruto was the first to step out, heading in the direction Lancelot had calculated. The winding mountain path was narrow in some places and wide in others, but for the most part, only allowed 2 people to walk side by side. The dwarf with a shield went first, followed by the human knight and succubus paladin. The scholar and the cook walked alongside each other, the latter's magic boots making her stride as effortlessly as if she were walking on flat ground. Bringing up the rear was Alamir, with the skeleton head beside him, and thanks to a mental connection with the human knight, Lancelot could be kept informed about the situation at the back of the group at all times. As they moved, everyone was alert to any abnormalities in the surrounding environment. Lancelot also tried to focus his attention, but the omnipresent red fog seemed to have a suppressive effect on spirit perception, making it completely impossible to sense anything beyond 100 feet. But 100 feet was not a short distance. Lancelot suddenly patted the dwarf on the shoulder and then raised a fist, signaling a warning to his companions. It was not the first time this had happened today, and the group immediately drew weapons and went on alert, scanning in every direction for signs of the enemy. From ahead came the buzzing sound of insect wings beating at high speed, indicating the type of enemy. In the next second, 8 humanoid flies appeared in everyone's view, cast demons, one of the most common types of demons in the Great Abyss. These demons immediately spotted the group on the mountain path below, and their thirst for blood prompted them to dive towards the travelers. Although there was a succubus among these mortals, implying that these humans might be the plaything of said succubus, when had demons ever cared about the opinions of their kind? After tasting fresh flesh, they would be more than happy to use their long, slender proboscises to punch a few holes in the succubus's body. The only thing that could make demons obey was the threat of death, and clearly most succubi could not impose such a threat. In their eyes, mortals were nothing more than creatures they could slaughter and toy with at will. At least, until they encountered a group of truly powerful adventurers, these wild demons would continue to think so. Bruto patiently waited for the enemy to get close enough before swinging his hammer. The demon, diving at high speed, couldn't dodge in time, and the cold iron hammer's head smashed viciously onto the face of the cast demon with the pointed mouth, spraying a mixture of red and white flesh and blood, instantly killing the demon that was at the forefront of the attack. This was the dwarf's experience from the previous few battles. Those flying fellows were incredibly agile, so if he threw his magic warhammer from too far away, it was likely to be dodged by the enemy. That meant before the hammer could fly back to him, he would have to endure hits with only his shield raised. And considering the combat capability of his elder brother, by the time the warhammer flew back, the battle would mostly have ended. Lancelot had also mastered the knack of fighting flying demons in this kind of environment. The area was too confined to maneuver freely, so he simply leaped into midair to fight. With his impressive physical prowess and a bit of assistance from his true chi, he could leap dozens of feet, moving through the air like an ape. Between the cliffs of the Great Abyss, no matter whether they were enemies that dared to attack him or those he was pursuing, they would all be bisected after a flash of cold light, plummeting straight down. Illyphisia dutifully played the role of protector. She stood with her shield raised in front of the halfling and the scholar, with her radiant cold iron broadsword in hand, ready to give any enemy who got too close a taste of pain. Some demons might find her appearance curious. Succubi typically wore as little as possible and even wished to strip everything off once a battle started. Who would have thought to see one like her bundled up in an iron can? A caste demon apparently thought the plump halfling looked particularly delicious. The succubus holding the shield suddenly became an extreme nuisance. It charged towards the rear of this mortal team, imagining how it would use the spikes on its face to pierce the graceful body of the succubus, oblivious to the fact that it was about to face the greatest shock of its demonic life. The cold iron broadsword in Illyphisia's hand was already as bright as a torch, but as she swung it towards the demon, the light on the blade surged suddenly, shining as brightly as a sun appearing in the valley. No. The intense light made the caste demon with its huge compound eyes dizzy, but what truly shocked it was how a succubus could unleash such an attack. Evil Bane Slash! The succubus paladin let out a crisp and firm battle cry as her longsword, gleaming with golden light, slashed through the demon like a sickle through wheat, cutting the caste demon clean in half. The searing light on the blade instantly vaporized the demon's blood, leaving the corpse charred when it hit the ground, as if burned by fire. All the caste demons were attracted by the attention. Either the destructive power contained in the succubus's sword or the fact that this demon was actually a holy warrior placed a tremendous strain on their already limited wits, causing a brief vacancy in their minds. But for Lancelot, this brief moment was enough for him to accomplish a great deal. The sword in the human knight's hand, Frost Slash, emitted a green sword aura, as the 4-foot sword blade suddenly grew more than double in length. He moved with a trail of afterimages, hopping vertically across the cliff face, the greenish sword light sweeping over the still stunned enemies. When Lancelot landed again, the caste demons in the sky began to split open one after another, their broken bodies falling into the endless abyss below, eventually becoming food for some lucky demon or hitting the head of some unlucky creature. "Couldn't you have left me a couple?" Bruto complained. He had just finished dealing with his second opponent and was looking for another target when he found there were none left in the sky. Chapter 208. Although boss, your moves just now were indeed powerful, the evil Bane Slash still looks cooler, commented the skull from the side, its voice filled with a ghostly tone. Besides, when cast by a tannery, it even comes with a powerful deterrent effect. So, that was the evil Bane Slash? Lancelot asked curiously, looking at Illyphisia. He had heard about the holy warrior's incredible abilities before, and the golden sword aura of the succubus just now was indeed very impressive, its power comparable to his own Qing Yuan sword technique enhanced by innate true qi. Yes, Cass was coming too fast just now, and I was worried that ordinary attacks wouldn't stop it, Illyphisia admitted, a bit embarrassed by the praise. To be honest, I couldn't believe it myself when I first mastered this skill, considering I still possess a demon's body, it greatly encouraged me. That's amazing, only by being recognized by the essence of goodness can you wield that kind of power, Cromwell remarked thoughtfully. But since you still have the body of a fiend, the evil Bane Slash could probably still harm you. Upon hearing these words, Illyphisia's expression instantly darkened. Realizing his blunder, the skull quickly tried to make amends. Don't get me wrong, I'm not questioning your essence. The fallen paladin's evil Bane Slash can affect you as well. The poor succubus was on the verge of tears as soon as these words were spoken. Lancelot cast a plaintive look at Cromwell and began to console Illyphisia. Don't listen to the skull's nonsense. Who would use the evil Bane Slash against you? How could there not be? Sighed the succubus paladin. Not everyone is willing to listen to my story like you guys, especially other holy warriors. Who I am, what I've done, what I do, none of that matters to them, they only see a demon, a particularly seductive succubus who tempts others to fall. What about your angel lover? Surely he must dispel many misunderstandings. Those guys turn utterly respectful as soon as they see Eldon, like they're meeting their idol, said the succubus, a sweet smile spreading across her face at the mention of her love. But some, even after hearing Eldon's explanations, still refuse to change their views, firmly believing I've completely controlled him through charm. In a way, they've got it completely backwards. A great knight once said that race does not define honor, stated Lancelot earnestly. I believe no one has the right to judge you as long as you remain true to your heart. Those so-called holy warriors don't realize they have strayed from the righteous path, their fanaticism will lead them into trouble sooner or later. Thank you, Ilithisia nodded gratefully to Lancelot, and then suddenly her face broke into a sly smile. Tajana would be very happy to know that's what you think. How did this get brought up? Lancelot turned awkwardly. Okay, let's keep moving forward, shall we? Actually, on the way, Lancelot's personal issues had become the most eagerly discussed topic among the group. After all, with a friendly succubus in the team, many long curious questions finally had their answers, and Lancelot himself was very concerned about these answers, so he let everyone make jokes at his expense. Firstly, like all demons, succubi are inherently chaotic, which in itself means endless possibilities. Secondly, succubi can derive pleasure from many things, whereas most demons only pursue the thrill of killing and torture, which is mostly related to the horrible pain that comes with level advancement. Lastly, there are indeed succubi who truly fall in love with mortals, and this is not a rare occurrence. But most of them don't end well. Simply losing interest and vanishing suddenly is already a relatively good outcome. Although succubi often travel to the prime material plane on missions, they don't truly understand how to live in mortal society. Due to mortals' fear and hostility towards demons, most succubi disguise themselves as charming ordinary people. But paper can't wrap fire, and there are too many potential issues, whether it's the accidental reveal of antlers or a tail when excited, or the unforeseen birth of a child with bat wings. Either situation can lead a poor mortal to the reality that their partner hails from the bottomless abyss. From there, things quickly move towards a tragic end. For those succubi who habitually use lies to start and maintain a relationship, the final outcome is, in fact, predetermined. Therefore, Ilithisia was lucky. She approached that angel in her true form as a succubus. She had been ready to be slain on the spot by the object of her affection. Luckily, the goddess of luck, Tamora, took a liking to her that day, and her confession was a great success. Her angel lover was far more mature and wise than the average mortal and provided tremendous support as she struggled against her innate nature. After hearing Ilithisia's story, everyone reacted differently. Alamir was so moved he was all tears, insisting her story proved the great power of love, and once again invited Ilithisia to join Shani's church. The scholar thought he had harvested valuable psychological material on succubi, which is of utmost interest to all male demon researchers. Meanwhile, Lancelot remained silent. His mind was flashing with various thoughts, and he almost lost his footing and fell off the cliff because he was lost in thoughts, having to invoke the Ice Heart spell just to calm his mind. But some crazy ideas had taken root in his heart. Maybe he should do as Ilithisia did and confess his feelings directly to Tajana? Should he make his thoughts clear to Tajana, instead of hiding behind the armor of politeness and duty, cautiously probing with the long spear of his affection? Lancelot shook his head, dispelling these naive thoughts. He had made similar overtures when he had just become a knight, but he was no longer that impulsive and reckless young man. How did that saying go? A confession is always the victory chant, not the clarion call to charge. So, he had to continue the tango with the succubus lord with patience. As the group continued to explore, they did come across some special locales. The first thing that caught everyone's attention was some mysterious runes carved on the cliff face. These runes were very ancient, and their survival to this day was clearly due to the power of some magic. Paladin recognized these runes as a very old form of abyssal text, which greatly piqued his interest. Chapter 209. Deciphering text wasn't a difficult task. As a scholar researching the lower planes, Paladin's backpack always contained a very practical magic scroll comprehend languages. This level 1 spell could last for an hour and allowed its recipient to understand any spoken language or any written text. However, it was only limited to the literal meaning, and the spell was incapable of decrypting secret codes or secret texts. Since it was merely a level 1 magic and possessed no ability to cause harm, many adventurers didn't even know of its existence. What do these symbols mean? Lancelot asked curiously, his spiritual sense hinting that there was something very dangerous behind this rock wall, but the sensing was not very clear through the thick soil. It seems to say that this place is the final resting place of a powerful demon lord. Paladin showed a puzzled expression. This is a graveyard? Aren't demons immortal and undying? How could there be a graveyard? Not all demons are immortal and undying, the skull-shaped encyclopedia spoke up. There's one kind that isn't. Really? Doubts came from the only demon in the team. As far as I know, all demons are killed. There has never been a case of one dying from old age. Utanary indeed do not. Cromwell bumped his smooth forehead against that string of runes, but the creators of these writings, the Obirith, were different. Obirith? This is the tomb of an ancient lord of Obirith. The scholar's eyes were full of a thirst for knowledge. Weren't they defeated by the invading Era Celestial's armies and their former slaves, the Tannery demons, subsequently fading into obscurity? When they had just been driven out from the plains of the abyss, they didn't feel that their race end was near. Many powerful lords of Oberith hid in deeper plains, waiting for the opportunity to strike back. Cromwell thoroughly enjoyed showing off his knowledge in front of everyone, but later on, changes within the bottomless abyss itself directly led to the decline of the Oberith demon race. Changes within the abyss itself. Ilithisia was also very curious about this. I've never heard of such things before. After all, that is history from countless centuries ago, it's normal for you not to know. The skull chuckled. By the way, how old are you? The succubus's face darkened, grabbed the skull as if to throw it down the cliff, and Lancelot had no intention of stopping her. Sometimes the skull indeed had too malicious a mouth. Ah! I'm wrong, I'm wrong! The skull shouted in panic. Its floating ability was very odd. It could only hover about 5 or 6 feet off the ground as if there was an invisible body beneath it, but in reality, it didn't have the ability to fly. Naturally, Ilithisia wouldn't really go through with that action. She released the skull back, saying in a faint angry tone. Keep talking. He, just kidding, Cromwell replied with a smile. There's not much to it really. After the Era invasion, the energy within the abyss itself changed. The Oberiths first discovered that no new kin were being promoted, then they were horrified to find that their physical bodies began to weaken, something that maintained their transcendent essence had changed. At the same time, the strength of the Tannery rapidly increased, with lord-level powerhouses emerging continuously, and the overall strength of the race expanding rapidly. That's the true reason you could leap to become the ruling race of the abyss. So is this the tomb that the once lords of Oberith had built in advance when they sensed their imminent demise? Paladin asked curiously, but aren't ancient Oberith lords like Pazuzu, the Wind Demon King, and King Yet, the Mother of Demons, still alive and well? Just look at what Pazuzu looks like now. Apart from that eagle-like hooked beak and a pair of bird claws on his feet, the Wind Demon King is essentially a winged human male. And King Yet is the same. Her figure is quite tempting, that is if you ignore her face. The skeletal figure, taking advantage of the fact that lord-level demons cannot enter the Great Abyss, audaciously commented on the big shots of this plane. Humanoid appearance is a trait of the Tannery demon race, right? Paladin was a bit clearer about Cromwell's meaning. Are you saying that these features hint at the reason they have continued to exist until today? Exactly, these old monsters undertook some kind of unknown magical ritual, which allowed them to regain the acknowledgement of abyss power. The Tannery traits are merely byproducts of this act. Fundamentally, they are no longer pure Oberith. The skeletal head shook as it spoke. Of course, there are those who refuse to change, such as the giant octopus residing in the Shadow Sea, and that big worm which was one of the first to carry the title of Demon Prince. But they each have their own special reasons for being alive to this day, and there's no doubt that the life form of the Oberith race has been abandoned by the will of the abyss. As soon as he finished speaking, a rumbling vibration suddenly came from under everyone's feet. Lancelot's face changed, and he quickly warned. Be careful. The entire earth seemed to rotate at once. The process came abruptly and ended just as swiftly. A few seconds later, the ground had stilled again. But now, the dirt path under their feet was tilted about 20 degrees towards the cliffside. Those walking on it had to always pay attention, to avoid slipping and falling off. I think you might have spoken too much truth. Paladin complained to the skeletal head, still unsettled. This is a warning from the will of the abyss. Nonsense, such phenomena are common in the Great Abyss. The skeletal figure tried to argue back, but his tone was clearly weaker than before. Hey! What's that over there? Kola suddenly spoke, pointing to a crack in the rock wall beside them, which was wide enough for a person. The cold wind blowing out from within indicated that there was a large space behind it. Oh! This is most likely the entrance to the tomb, opened by the tumult just now, isn't it? The dwarf seemed very excited. What do you say, Lancelot? Shall we go in and explore? The human knight looked skeptically at the crack. Its appearance might be a little too convenient, right? With this thought, he took out the magic wands given by the abyssal fox-headed demon and handed them to Paladin, telling the scholar. Take a look at these wands, would you? If there's nothing wrong with them, then let's see if what we're looking for is inside. I also suspected that there was something wrong with the stuff that Fox gave. Let me have a look. Paladin pulled out a monocle and clipped it to his eye socket, scrutinizing the intricate engravings on the magic wand. Chapter 210. The spells on the upper part of these magic wands seem to be some kind of item location variant, and they already specify the target they are looking for. This part is about the description of that divine artifact. Paladin muttered to himself, but what are these extra runes on the bottom for? Gradually, the scholar's expression turned solemn, while Lancelot had already suspected that something was amiss. Paladin picked up several other wands to examine them and even cast a few spells on them, but apparently the results didn't satisfy him. Finally, taking a deep breath, the scholar addressed everyone. The upper half of each wand is the same, likely the magic they mentioned for detecting the Eye of Sarazdan. But there's something else in the lower half, and its complexity far exceeds that of the upper half. Paladin demonstrated the abnormalities of the three wands, but aside from himself, no one could understand those patterns as intricate as fingerprints. I knew those lords of Withering weren't up to any good. Lancelot frowned and said, what kind of effects do they have? I'm sorry, I can't tell, and the detection magic didn't give me any answers. Paladin shrugged, I can barely recognize that it is from the transformation system of spells, probably not something good. Doesn't that mean these sticks are all useless now? Bruto lamented from the side, are these guys brain dead? We're just helping to find an object. Honestly, without these things, I would be even more uneasy. Paladin smiled, I can try to destroy the runes on the lower half while keeping the detection magic on the upper half active. That's possible? Lancelot asked with some surprise, having already prepared himself to throw all three wands away. Of course, the scholar chuckled, pulling out a finely crafted small knife from his backpack, I am an expert in this field. Moments later, Paladin activated the modified wand, confirming that there were no items resembling the Eye of Sarazdan nearby. Since what we're looking for isn't inside, let's not waste any more time here, let's move on. Lancelot nodded in approval, as his spirit perception was utterly averse to the idea of entering that crack. Oh, but think about the possible treasure inside. The dwarf said, his face full of disappointment, we are adventurers, how can we pass up such an opportunity? Kid, you'll die very quickly that way, Lancelot said gravely, patting the dwarf's shoulder, our goal is to find that black bead, there's no need to take additional risks. And think about it, what good can come from magic items buried with a dead demon lord for countless centuries? Definitely all sorts of troublesome curses, and they might even take over your body, using your flesh to resurrect. It's not as bad as you're making it out to be. The dwarf weakly objected, but already resigned to the situation and continued forward. Wouldn't have guessed, boss, you're quite sharp. The skull floated crookedly nearby, the sloping ground seeming to affect even him. Many great heroes have died going into holes they shouldn't have. That really is the wisest thing I've ever heard, thanks a lot, Lancelot said with annoyance as he looked at the skull. A sharp bird cry came from the sky, making everyone tense again. The meaning of the cry was clear, soon, a flock of flomos would fly over their heads. As for whether a battle would occur, the choice wasn't in the hands of these outsiders. The group moved forward again, and the bird cries grew louder, but the figures of the winged demons never appeared. Instead, other noises emerged. After traversing a mountain ridge, the sounds suddenly became clear, and the group, fixing their gaze, discovered an intense battle unfolding not far away. By Moradin's beard. What is that? Bruto exclaimed in shock, mirroring Lancelot's feelings at the moment. One side of the battle was familiar to him, a large group of flomos, of which they had already killed many ruthless and evil demons today, but the other was a creature he had never seen before. At first glance, it appeared to be a huge, floating ball of flesh, but upon closer inspection, one could recognize the evil and twisted nature of the creature. In the center of the spherical body was a gigantic eyeball, under which was a huge mouth lined with sharp teeth. Thin tentacles grew from its body, each ending with a smaller eyeball. Lancelot had heard about such creatures from Paladin. It was an eye demon, one of the strangest beings in the multiverse and every adventurer's nightmare. The eyeballs at the ends of the tentacles were not just for expanding its field of vision. A blue ray shot from one eye, turning a flomo that was circling its head into a stone statue that shattered as it hit the ground. Another eyeball emitted a pink light, and the demon it shone upon immediately began attacking its own comrades, as if it had been charmed. Each small eyeball at the end of a tentacle could release different types of rays, and this peculiar creature fought by relying on these eye-generated beams, easily handling the numerous groups of winged demons. Bruto's cry of surprise attracted its attention, and the eye demon's body rotated slightly, its massive central eye looking their way. A deep humming sound filled everyone's ears, and the hammer in Alamir's hand, which glowed like a torch, extinguished in an instant. while the protective spells Paladin had cast on himself beforehand also suddenly dissipated. They were naturally familiar with this phenomenon. In fact, it was the eye demon's most debilitating skill for adventurers, the anti-magic field. Through its fearsome central eye, the eye demon could create a conical field of great distance that completely cut off the magical energies permeating the multiverse, including the rays emitted from its own auxiliary eyes. However, this didn't mean that a skilled warrior like Lancelot would have any advantage. The eye demon could simply activate the anti-magic field to instantly strip away any active protection and buff magic on an enemy, then close its main eye to use its auxiliary eyes, which could paralyze, charm, petrify, instill fear, weaken, hypnotize, and even kill to go through the enemy one by one, always finding a way to deal with those muscle-relying types. Luckily, this eye demon seemed uninterested in Lancelot and his newly arrived companions, or perhaps it didn't even consider them worthy of its attention. It turned back and continued to focus on the Flomos circling around it like flies. "That's an eye demon, right?" Lancelot quietly asked Paladin, "What's it doing here?"